In a kingdom, a man announced before a crowd that the increasing damage that the surrounding monsters had been causing recently had become a problem for their people. Humans were suffering at the hands of the monsters and feared the demons being a threat. The townspeople have heard that the heroes have already begun making their move. A man from the crowd figured that the heroes must have been given plenty of money. The crowd began to chant in unison to never forgive the demons and to have the demon lord defeated. A man wearing a cloak listens to their chants from inside a building. He's brought back to the present when someone in front of him repeats that they were heroes. Blackmail, arbitrary punishment, and even assassination were things they could never forgive. The cloaked man argues that all of those crimes were necessary, and instead of worrying about them, he could just leave it to him. The man in front of him yells at him, saying that it was already too late. As heroes, they were supposed to be saving lives. So he asks the cloaked man, who was named Hidden, what they were supposed to do if they ended up hurting others instead. Hidden stared up at him blankly. Finally, the man gives Hidden an ultimatum. If he kept doing evil deeds, they had no choice but to expel him from their party. Surrounding him were the other members of the party, watching the argument warily. However, things weren't like that from the start. A year ago, in the kingdom capital's throne room, a royal sits on the throne thanking two figures kneeling before her for coming. It was Hidden and a girl named Tiana. Hidden was a scout and Tiana was a mage. The royal commends them since there were none who weren't aware of their accomplishments. She tells them that there was only one reason why they were called to the palace, and it was to defeat the demon lord. She tells them that there was a departure ceremony going to be held in a few days. The church would send the chosen hero and the saintess, and accompanying them would be a knight. The three were going on a quest to defeat the demon lord. They were a party that was mobilized by the royal's order. The distance to the demon stronghold where the demon king lived was long, and there were many who would want to put them at risk. And because of that, she wanted Hidden and Tiana to join the party. Later on, as they walk down the palace corridors, Hidden mumbles the plan to himself. They were to join the party partway and make up for their lack of experience and lifestyle skills. From beside him, Tiana comments that Hidden didn't seem too enthusiastic about the plan. Hidden explains that it was because of the plan to send in 3 people inside of a large army. There was also the monster attacks, although not driven by any hidden motives. All of the blame was being pushed onto the demons. Hidden says that despite being an order from the royal palace, it was all still too suspicious. Tiana says that it was possible. Above all else, however, if her power could be of any help to the people of the country, to protect the livestock being targeted and the travelers being attacked, then she would do what she had to. Oblivious to Hidden's own feelings, Tiana smiles determinedly. They eventually arrive at what appeared to be a meeting area in the palace. A group of 3 people greet Hidden and Tiana, already knowing that they were the 2 famous adventurers. The leader and the hero was a man named Ashram. He kindly introduces himself, and Tiana returns his greeting, introducing Hidden as well. Ashram smiles at them brightly, but Hidden stays quiet, his face blank as he nods. Suddenly a quiet voice speaks up. They say that since Ashram had called out to Hidden, the least he could do was reply. Ashram turns to the girl, saying that it was normal to feel nervous when meeting someone else for the first time. The girl was the saintess Mira, and hearing his words, she reluctantly backs down. The other girl with Ashram rather proudly says that she was sure Hidden had never spoken to people of their standing before, so she would overlook his rudeness that time. The girl was a knight named Linnea. Unbothered, Ashram says that since the 5 of them had to work together to defeat the demon lord, they would do things all over again. Ashram greets Hidden again, his hand raised and ready to shake Hidden's. Internally, Hidden can't help but think that the only reason adventurers like them were called was because the people who hired them were scared of Ashram and his group's lack of experience. The fact that the country wasn't starting a war with a large army meant that the national treasury wasn't doing too well. Ashram's group were well dressed and equipped with high-class equipment. If they were from wealthy families, then he would be able to tell what their sense of money was. If their group wasn't provided sufficient funding, then sooner or later they were going to run out. He was most likely added to the group to do something about it. But not only that, Ashram was full of openings. Once the departure ceremony ended, their journey would be known by the demons, not just the citizens. Assassins could blend into their daily lives, but he doubted Ashram and the rest would be able to recognize them. He wonders if he should just let Ashram confront what lied in wait for him in reality right then and there. However, his thoughts are interrupted when he hears stuttering. Tiana apologizes for his sake, saying that he just wasn't one to speak much. She promised that although he may appear very taciturn, she swore that he wasn't a bad person. Catching his eye, she smiles brightly at him. Hidden remains thoughtful. Finally, he turns to Ashram, Mira, and Linnea and calls out to them, catching their attention. He asks them for their thoughts on one thing: if they truly believed that their journey, the war, was for a just cause. Without hesitation, Ashram agrees. He says that for the country and the royal that hired them, the queen herself, Ashram would use his power for the sake of their just cause. Finally, Hidden shakes Ashram's hand and says that he would do the same. Internally, he can't help but think that he really couldn't shove the truth onto people. Hidden's mouth curls into a small smile as he turns to Tiana, who was looking at him approvingly. He tells himself that it was enough for him to bear everything alone. A group on the side of justice, saving the people from monsters and striking at the heart of evil. All they did must be just, and even their way of thinking must remain pure. Meanwhile, Hidden himself needed to act from the shadows, serving as the final line of the hero's party. Blackmail, punishments, and assassinations, he would take it upon himself to see them through. He was sure that the queen and the other higher-ups of the kingdom put him in that position with that thought in mind. If he told them the truth, Tiana would also eventually find out. Thinking about all the happy memories he shared with her when they were traveling alone, he says that it was her alone that he would promise to. They eventually make their way into an inn where Hidden takes it upon himself to haggle with the innkeeper. He asked the innkeeper if he truly believed they would be willing to pay a gold coin to stay in an inn as rundown as the one they were currently in. The innkeeper, although his voice betrayed how scared he was, says that even if Hidden said something like that, he still had a business to run. Hidden points out that the prices in the surrounding area haven't changed all that much, and the man's inn didn't really offer much outside of the usual. Internally, he can't help but think how there were a lot of malicious merchants in their current town. He tells the innkeeper that his party would just go to another inn, much to the older man's shock. Hidden makes it a point to say that they would make sure to let everyone in the capital know about his prices, adding that the innkeeper should look forward to the number of customers he'll be getting in the future. In a panic, the innkeeper relents to let them stay over for a silver coin. Hidden immediately exchanges a silver coin for a key to their room. He thinks about how if they kept getting ripped off without even having received any travel funds, it wouldn't matter how much money they had, they would always be lacking. And among all the party members, he was the only one who could get them a fair price. His methods may be dubious, but they really are effective. It could almost be a superpower. Before Hidden could turn and leave for the others, the man lets out an unamused laugh. The innkeeper says that it wasn't like Hidden was using his own money. He was sure that nobody would find fault in him for spending it so lavishly. Hidden tells the innkeeper not to be stupid, pointing out that if he did have that much money, that would be the first thing he would have done. The innkeeper shrugs with a smirk, saying that the rumors he heard about the heroes being paid handsomely were just exaggerated. Hidden agrees, making sure to remind the innkeeper to tell his business partners about their financial status. The innkeeper didn't look thrilled by his words, but he stayed quiet all the same. Hidden had explained the same thing to every merchant they came across, but he says that only half of them understood the truth. Hidden observed his teammates quietly as they talked amongst themselves. He thought about how while they were still fairly close to the capital, they still couldn't let their guard down. As they're settled into their inn, Linnea tells the rest of the group that since they had free time until they left the next day, she would be heading out into town. The other members of Ashram's group agree with her. However, before they could make it out the door, Hidden calls out to them and reminds them to bring their weapons when heading out. Linnea gives him an exasperated sigh, calling him a coward. How does that logic even work? He's a coward for being prepared. That's crazy. Linnea says that if he was always on edge, then the team would be the ones getting tired. Ashram tries to mediate, saying that Hidden had a point and he was just speaking from experience. However, he also points out that their current inn was still quite close to the capital, so he didn't think anything would happen if they let loose a little. That said, he promises that they'd bring their weapons along. Hidden turns away, saying that if they were to continue their journey, they needed to be even more careful. Ashram smiles brightly at him, saying that if there was anything else he was worried about, then he wanted Hidden to consult him about it, just like how they did so just now. Hidden agrees, saying that he won't hold back when it happens. Mira watches their conversation with a frown from the sidelines. With their conversation over, Hidden gets up and says that he was heading out to go shopping, reminding everyone not to leave themselves open. Tiana quickly makes a move to get up as well, saying that she would be coming with him. Hidden asks why she was coming along when shopping was always his job. Tiana looks nervous for a second before she says that since they weren't traveling with just the two of them anymore, she should come along to help carry the baggage. Hidden immediately shuts the idea down, saying that he appreciated the thought enough. Tiana is caught speechless. Hidden says it would be more efficient to leave the one who was used to the work to do it. Hidden tells Tiana that she should stay with Ashram and their luggage. Tiana calls out to him in a rush, saying that they weren't finished talking. She moves to follow him, but Hidden ignores her and closes the door behind him. Leaving a quiet Tiana, Hidden walks alone down the streets. He was convinced that they shouldn't let their guard down just because they were in a city. Not because of the possibility of the demons attacking, but rather because it was the perfect time for their enemies from within to bare their fangs. In the first place, the decision to dispatch their hero was made only recently. It would take for the information to reach the Demon Lord's army since they were far from the capital. The people they had to be on guard against were the nobles who wanted to rebel against the queen and the subjugation of the Demon Lord. They needed to be wary of their moves. If their plan was to delay them, not was the perfect. Hidden frowns as he catches sight of Linnea and Mira shopping, completely oblivious to a man stalking them in the shadows. Watching as the man makes his move and leaves the alley he was watching them through, Hidden thoughtfully wonders if their higher-ups were counting on the expedition succeeding. But what he needed to do doesn't change. As Linnea and Mira continue to be unaware of the man sneaking up on them, a knife already drawn and ready to strike, Hidden grabs the man by the neck and drags him back to the alley. You'd wonder how no one noticed it when it happened in broad daylight, but maybe he's just cool like that. The man asks Hidden what he was planning, and Hidden calmly returns the question back at him. The man freezes as the tip of a long needle is pointed right into his eye. He begs Hidden to wait. Hidden asks him which noble hired him, saying that he just might spare him if he disclosed the information. The man tries to tell him that he didn't know, but he suddenly coughs out in pain, making Hidden freeze in shock. Hidden calls out to the man, trying to bring him back, but the man starts coughing up blood. With the man steadily getting weaker in his arms, Hidden comes to the conclusion that it was a slow-acting poison that he probably wouldn't be able to treat in time. If they could dispose of the man the way they did, Hidden figured that he probably knew nothing. He tells the man to rest easy because he would avenge him by killing the person that killed him. He throws a tarp over the dead body just as someone appears at the end of the alley. He yells for the person to reveal themselves. It was Tiana, looking at him with concern. She asks him what was wrong, why he was shouting, and if something happened. Hidden reassures her that it was nothing. He was simply breaking up a fight between two drunks and chased them away. Since Linnea and Mira were nearby, it would be troublesome if they got caught up in the mess too. Tiana seems to hesitantly take his word for it. Quickly changing the subject, he apologizes to her about their conversation from earlier. Tiana is almost surprised about his apology and apologizes too. But Hidden disagrees and says that as fellow adventurers he should have had more faith in her. Tiana blushes at his words and says that if that was the case they should go together. Hidden cuts in and says that there were a lot of things he'd like to ask her to take care of, but there was something more important he wanted to entrust to her first. Hidden asks if she could guard Linnea and Mira for him since the place was pretty dangerous. Tiana reluctantly agrees, asking if he would be fine going alone. Hidden reassures her that he would be and that after he got the supplies he would head back to the inn immediately. He reminds him that Tiana and the others shouldn't be out for too long. Tiana agrees and tells him to take care, but Hidden was already turning the corner and disappearing into the crowd. Nearly a year had passed since that conversation and they had begun their journey. The Demon Lord had already started preparing countermeasures. All the while Hidden did his work in the shadows. The reason their journey was taking so much time was that they couldn't go straight from the capital to the Demon Lord's nation. Because of that, powerful demons were entrusted with the task of assassinating them. He frowned in concern. As he sat in a carriage with the rest of the party who were lost in a happy conversation, he was lost in thought. It wouldn't be strange for the powerful mastermind from the demon side to appear any day now. Their party eventually arrives at their destination. Hidden noticed that Tiana had an odd look on her face, but his attention was quickly diverted to keeping an eye out on the people around them. As they pass by an innocent-looking girl selling flowers, Hidden feels a chill run down his spine. The flower seller's innocent smile drops and she smirks, having been noticed by Hidden even in her current state. Hidden whips his head around in a panic. The flower seller notes that it was only expected of a renowned demon killer like Hidden. She was sure that he was the only one who had his guard up. After all, the girl says that they were cut from the same cloth. Hidden goes after the girl, but not before Linnea notices him split from the group. Hidden follows the girl into an alley. She smiles pleasantly to see him, but in the next second the bouquet in her hand scatters as she takes out a dagger, aimed right at Hidden. Hidden barely dodges in time and the girl smiles in delight. Hidden leaps back and the girl follows suit. She's too quick for him and in an instant she appears right before him. She slashes at him again. Her blade misses Hidden by inches. Seeing as he had no other choice, he detonates a bomb on his body that catches him and the girl in the explosion. The strength of it was enough to catch the attention of the people outside the alley. The girl smiles, despite being gravely wounded. Hidden waits for her next move, although wounded just as much. As the dust settles and the talking from outside the alley grows louder, the girl tells Hidden that she was thoroughly impressed and she would definitely repay his debt one day. Disappearing into thin air right before him, the girl says that they should meet again in the future. It all eventually leads back to now. Hidden is quiet as the rest of his party finally have him cornered. Ashram tells Hidden that if he kept on doing evil deeds then they had no choice but to expel him from the party. Tiana suddenly cuts in saying that Hidden had really changed and she was disappointed. Hidden asks if even she was really saying that now, making her go quiet. Tiana says that she agreed with Ashram. As the hero party that was trying to defeat the Demon King, the hope of the kingdom, the kind of evil acts he did couldn't be forgiven. She asks why he couldn't understand that. Hidden says that he didn't understand what they were trying to say since what he was doing was absolutely necessary. Ashram asks if he really had to coerce the innkeeper so that they would lower their prices. Hidden explains that they were offering unfair rates and he only made them go back down to the normal rate. Mira tells him that they've complained and now it was the talk of the town. Linnea points out that there was also the fight in the middle of town. Hidden tells her that the assassin was aiming for her. Linnea says that he was obviously lying. Calling an attempt on your life a lie when it was clearly stopped by the guy in front of you is crazy work. Tiana asks if the same thing happened back when they first started traveling when she caught him in the alley. She says that she shouldn't have turned a blind eye to what was happening. Even now she still regrets doing so. Ashram says that he thinks that was just the beginning of Hidden's crimes, so he begs him that it would be his last. If he does so, they would be able to continue their journey together. Hidden argues that there were so many people hostile towards them. If they left them alone, they wouldn't be able to defeat the Demon King. Ashram argues back that the entire country was supporting their endeavors, so there was no way that those people would try to hurt them. Funny thing to say when the guy who's literally kept their backs clean is the way they're kicking out. Ashram repeats his request. Hidden had to change his ways and never do it again. If he does so, then they won't remove him from the party. Immediately, Hidden refuses. He stares Ashram down and Ashram is quiet for a moment. Ashram says that it was unfortunate that Hidden didn't even understand how much they've tried to help him. Hidden blankly agrees, saying that it didn't seem like they were going to understand each other. Tiana asks why Hidden was the way he was, wondering if it was her fault. As she holds back her tears, Ashram tries to console her, saying that if anything was to blame, then it was him, so she didn't need to take responsibility. He puts an arm over her and Tiana doesn't push him away. Hidden freezes at the sight and a sort of understanding comes over him. He says that there was no need to beat around the bush. He says that if that was what Ashram wanted, then he would leave. Tiana is confused, asking what he meant. Ashram quickly gets defensive, saying that Hidden was misunderstanding things and he was only trying to comfort Tiana. Ashram tries to say again that if he just changed his ways, then there wouldn't be a problem. With a blank look on his face, he monotonously apologizes. He gets up and tells them not to regret their decision. Ashram says that he won't, and it was for the best for the both of them. Tiana stays quiet as Hidden heads to the door and leaves without another word. Dropping some gold coins into a man's hand, Hidden asks for the fastest carriage he had since he wanted to go to the capital. The carriage departs with Hidden the only passenger. Left to his thoughts, he's glad that he had the foresight to secure his own travel funds. It was funding that he earned during his free time, not through illegal means. After a second thought, he realized it was weird to say such things when money was still money. Considering all of the malice he'd had to face until now, he doubted that the others possessed any of the knowledge or skills to avoid them. He was sure that they would end up in trouble somewhere. However, it was his decision not to let them know. If he knew things would turn out the way they did, then he would have told them the truth. A rumor had spread a while back that said that because they had the country's support, they could journey while living lavishly. Hidden thinks he had gotten too complacent letting rumors like that spread. He was the only one rumored to be taking the money for himself. The others probably wouldn't be affected. He wonders how the people would treat the party now that their negotiator had disappeared. Suddenly, Tiana's face comes to mind. In hindsight, even though it was one unexpected thing after another, he still took things too lightly. If he had just faced them directly, maybe the future would have been different. In the end, Hidden thinks that everything might have been because of his unnecessary meddling. He thinks back to his and Tiana's younger years. If he knew that things would turn out the way they did, he says that he should have cut ties back then. He thinks of another girl who had offered him to work with her. He eventually arrives at a dark guild. It had been a while since he's been there. He enters the Grand Guild Hall and asks the guild receptionist if a girl named Luna was in. The receptionist asks what business he had with her boss, and he says that he had an urgent request for her. She eyes his dirtied body, his old equipment, and the dark look in his eyes. The receptionist tries to tell him that Luna was out at the moment, but Hidden insists, saying that it was enough if the receptionist told Luna his name. Clicking her tongue, the receptionist finally agrees and climbs to the second floor. Hidden waits as he hears knocking and some whispering. The receptionist comes back down and tells Hidden that Luna wouldn't be able to meet him. Hidden doesn't believe it. She takes out a bell and gives it a ring, saying that he would end up in pain if he kept being so insistent. She urges him to leave. Two large and rough-looking men block his way to the receptionist, and Hidden finally turns, saying that he would just come back again next time. Their conversation comes to an abrupt halt as heavy footsteps descend the staircase. A girl appears with her head in her hand. In a terrifying voice, she repeats to her staff that if she called for them, they were to come within 2 seconds or else they would be fired. She finally looks up at the scene in front of her. Her staff are trembling in fear, but Hidden is calm. He greets the bedraggled girl as Luna. Luna had sat up in her bed, having just woken up. Her room is filled with the sound of a tinkling bell as she rang it over and over. She realizes that nobody is coming and she slams her fist on the bell by her bedside. She quickly gets dressed and exits her room with a terrifying vengeance, which leads to the present. She stomps down to the ground floor, calling for her staff. In a menacing voice, she says that she's been calling for them non-stop. Luna was completely enraged. Before she could rip into them, Hidden had greeted her. Immediately, all her anger is wiped from her and her eyes are bright, a smile gracing her face. She leaps from the stairs and right into Hidden's arms, the man successfully catching her. She asks if he had come there for her, making her happy. She hugs him tightly, saying that it had been a long time. Luna inhales deeply, happy that he was the real deal. Hidden asks if there were imposters. From behind them, the staff watch, both awkward and shocked. Tearfully, she starts getting angry again as she says that she was close to crying when he married an annoying woman in her dreams. Hidden calms her down, saying that it was only in her dreams. The guild receptionist cuts into their conversation and asks Luna if Hidden was an acquaintance of hers. Luna smiles and introduces Hidden as her lover. Her words make a chill run down the receptionist's spine. Seeing her reaction, Luna lets go of Hidden and asks if she was trying to chase him out. Her anger coming back up, Luna demanded to know whether the receptionist was trying to harm Hidden. Before she could explode anymore, Hidden calms her down again and reassures her that the receptionist was just being cautious when he said he was going to see her. Luna's mood immediately shifts again and she hums in delight. She says that if that was what he said, then she had no choice but to trust him. Her hand balls into a fist as she says that if her staff tried to pull the same thing again, she was going to turn them all into mincemeat. Luna is quite the contrast from his last party. Whoa, Hidden tells her that she didn't have to do that before asking if she had time to talk. Immediately, Luna smiles brightly at the idea and agrees. She leads him to the second floor and Hidden comments that it had been a while since he's been to her room. Luna agrees. She then puffs out her cheeks indignantly and says that despite telling Hidden that he could and visit whenever he wanted but he never did, Luna tells him to make himself at home and offers him a seat as she gets tea. She offers alcohol too if he wants. However, Hidden notices that she was motioning for him to take a seat at the bed. Real smooth, Luna. He immediately passes by her and heads for the sofa. They inevitably settle in and Luna sits next to Hidden after serving him tea. She asks if it was alright to get straight to the point and ask him what happened. Hidden agrees and says that he couldn't tell anyone except her about their journey to defeat the Demon Lord. As they drink their tea, Hidden goes over their journey for the past year and everything he had to do leading up to his exile from the group. By the time he's finished, their tea is empty and he sets down his cup. There's a silence in the room as Luna processes his words. Finally, Hidden asks if he would be allowed to stay in the guild for the meantime. Luna nods and says that of course it was okay for him to do so. She leans on his shoulder and says that she already invited him before. She had even asked him to stop being an adventurer and to just come work with her. Hidden smiles lightly and says that although that was true, it had been a while since they last met. He was worried that she'd already changed her mind. Luna says that of course she wouldn't. As long as it was him, she was willing to do anything. Luna says that despite always turning her down since he was finally there, she was really happy. Hidden is grateful for her words. He remembers that it had already been 3 years since they last met. Luna specifies that it was 2 years, 8 months, 17 days and 8 hours. Luna is definitely the type of person to celebrate the day they met like it's an anniversary. Back then, Hidden and Tiana were still traveling as adventurers. During one of their requests, Hidden was telling the receptionist that claws, fangs, fur, and feathers were the only conditions given for them to acquire. The receptionist explains that it was their mistake having forgotten to write it down, so of course they would still pay. However, they say that both the monster's internal organs and blood could be turned into medicine. They know that they were difficult parts to handle since they were so easily damaged, but if they managed to get them, the receptionist offered to pay them 50% more than the market price. Tiana immediately shares a smile with Hidden at the news. Hidden asks if the receptionist would like to buy it off of him if the price really was that high. The receptionist immediately accepts the deal, buying everything they had. Later on, Hidden and Tiana find themselves summoned back to the guild. Apparently, the receptionist was told to bring them in. Someone was looking for the people who accepted the request from before. The receptionist was nervous and Hidden looked rather reluctant. He turns to Tiana and she nervously gives him the go-ahead. Entering a room, Hidden is introduced to a girl. The girl says that she saw his work and he was interested in what he created. The materials they submitted were stored excellently. The battle skill that made it possible for him to do such high-quality work was worthy of praise. He had devised a method that could efficiently dispatch and kill his targets in a way that didn't cause them much stress. As Luna finished telling her story to Hidden, she says that she wasn't really doing it for a noble cause or anything. Hidden is quiet for a moment before he lowers his glass, saying that he really couldn't accept her invitation after all. However, he tells her that he respected her from the bottom of his heart. His words touch Luna immensely and she takes a drink from her own glass, hiding her embarrassment. She thanks him softly. And now here they were again, 3 years later. Luna leans against Hidden with a happy smile on her face. Luna then says that putting him having to leave the party mid-journey aside, she couldn't believe that he split up with Tiana too. Hidden says that it was thanks to that he was there talking to her. Luna blushes at the thought before a thought comes to mind. She asks whether Hidden had completely cut off ties with her, not that he just stopped traveling with the group. Hidden admits that Tiana's feelings weren't directed at him anymore. He reassures Luna that he didn't come to her just because of that, but he's cut off when Luna lets out a yell of triumph, surprising Hidden. Luna says that if they were already over, although I'm quite sure that they were never even a thing, Hidden should go out with her instead. She then changes her mind and says that they could skip dating and just get married already. Girly moves really quick, I'll give her that. Hidden is caught off guard. He says that she wasn't exactly wrong, but he asks if she was truly alright with that. Luna takes his face in her hands and reassures him that she was completely sure, saying that he had no idea how long she waited for the day. Luna says that he would know it more than anyone. Her face red, she tells Hidden to become hers. Hidden lets out a soft smile and apologizes for making Luna wait. He says that if it was okay with her, then he asks that she let him stay by her side. Luna reassures him again before tackling him and declaring her love. With Luna on top of him, she asks if he wanted to get revenge on Ashram and the others. Hidden says that he didn't plan to, but he really wanted to know if he really was unnecessary. He says that it would be really helpful to him if she could get some information from a guild branch near them. Luna agrees, but after a pause she asks if he was planning on trying to help them again. Hidden reassures her that he won't because it would defeat the entire purpose of him leaving. He just wanted to know. Luna laughs, reassured. She tells him to watch because she bets that Ashram's group would end up getting exploited and left with nothing to eat soon enough. Hidden tells her that they would cross that bridge when they got to it, but he changes the subject to something more important. He tells her that if there was anything she needed to be handled right now, she should just give it to him. He came there to be with her after all, so he was sure that he could be of use to her. Luna laughs merrily. She reassures him that him being there was really enough for her, but she did love his duty-bound side. There's a pause before she tells him that there was a noble named Lingot that she wanted to be done with in 3 days if possible. Hidden agrees, saying that although he still had to look into it, he would have it done in 2 days. With that, Luna throws her arms around him again and kisses him. Luna comments that the house was insanely big. If she had to choose, she would prefer to live in a snug little house with Hidden. He agrees, saying that if that was the case, he'll have to go look for some good land given the opportunity. Luna laughs, already looking forward to it. She hums in delight, saying that what they were doing was really easy. She pretends that her hands weren't wandering Hidden's body, but he immediately calls her out on it, saying that he was trying to hide. Luna laughs and apologizes half-heartedly. Hidden looks up. They had arrived at Lingot's mansion. Carrying Luna, he had managed to edge his way up a gap between the tall walls surrounding the estate. He helps Luna climb up, keeping his awkward angle to steady the two of them. Count Lingot was just a viscount from the countryside who barely managed his own small territory. However, because of a generous donation to the royal family, he was given the title of Count. Hidden wonders how a powerless viscount comes across that much money. Not only that, any unappealing rumors disappear as soon as they sprouted. Luna explains that a merchant named Ashram was his backer. Ashram was the president of a large trading company that mainly dabbled in trading illegal goods, but they also sold their services to carry out criminal acts. There have been knights and soldiers in charge of public security who had come closer to the truth, but the rumors quickly faded away. It wasn't really hard to imagine what happened to them and their families after that. The number of people that had fallen into ruin and families that had been split apart was beyond counting, and the reason Ashram continues to make such appalling business deals was that he needed a large sum of money. By making the nobility his puppets and embedding them in the framework of the country, Ashram would become a merchant who could no longer be confined by the world. What he needed was a noble that wouldn't question him and didn't possess any power by themselves, yet whose family had a long history. Count Lingot fit the bill. After being granted his new status and authority, Lingot continued to donate to the royal family, hoping to one day gain their favor. Linnea from Ashram's party was from the Lingot household. Lingot's daughter had overflowing talent with the sword, so he raised her as a knight. He had no qualms sending her to battle as long as it concerned his honor. Sitting atop the wall, Luna asks Hidden how they were planning on entering the mansion. They managed to get up the wall, but to get into the mansion they first had to go through the garden that was without a hiding spot in sight and filled with guards. And even if they did get past, there was still an extremely sturdy wall coupled with an extremely sturdy door equipped with a strong lock. Luna watches as Hidden takes out a gun-like option. Aiming it forward, he tells her that he was planning on going through the window on the second floor. The gun-like object fires a grappling hook that connects to a balcony of the mansion. He asks Luna if she was ready and she readily clings to him. Hidden tugs on the rope a few times, time-check that it was secure enough. With that, they slide through the air, over the guards loitering the garden who remained completely oblivious. They land safely on the balcony and Luna praises Hidden for a job well done. He took out another tool and pressed it against the glass of the balcony doors. Luna asks what the tool was for and Hidden explains it was a knife created to make holes in glass used in windows. Upon making a perfect circle, he pops off the piece of glass and slips his hand through, quietly opening the door. He easily swings it open and they enter the mansion. Luna asks if what they were doing wasn't quite risky. Hidden only says that times had been tough lately and he supposed everyone could be affected. Luna laughs and agrees with him. Listening closely around them, Hidden surmises that it didn't seem like there were any guards on the second floor. Luna wonders if the Count was cutting costs even then. The guards were only stationed around the mansion and on the first floor. They pass by his office, the study, and his family's private rooms. Eventually, they come to a door with reinforced locks. There was a lack of guards outside his room and his family's rooms were all further away. As Hidden picks the lock, he comments that Lingot didn't seem like the type to trust others. Seeing as the man was so suspicious, Luna says that they got the right place. Hidden agrees and the door clicks open. He urges Luna inside. In the room, a man sleeps peacefully in his bed only to be awoken by the sound of creaking. He opens his eyes to check. His eyes blow wide open to find something sharp aimed at one of them. Hidden and Luna stand before him. Hidden has his hand over the Count's mouth. He apologizes for intruding on him so late at night. As Luna keeps watch, Hidden talks to Lingot, who fearfully asks who they were. Hidden warns him not to shout. They were just there to gather information, so it was in his best interest to comply. Lingot ignores him and asks again who they were, but without missing a beat, Hidden takes one of his fingers and snaps it. Lingot tries to scream in pain, but Hidden breaks another of his fingers for shouting when Hidden had forbidden him. Lingot grunts in pain and Hidden monotonously tells him not to be a baby since his fingers could heal pretty easily. He suddenly places his knife's tip at one of the Count's nails. He says that since nails didn't really grow as fast, he would probably suffer for a while. Nervous because of his threat, Lingot asks him what he wanted. Hidden keeps his knife by the Count's nail as a reminder. Hidden asks about Ibram, the merchant who dies in an accident the other day. As far as he knew, Lingot was the one receiving the money. Hidden asks where he was keeping the money. Lingot says that he didn't know and he's never taken bribes before, nor does he know Ibram. Hidden cuts him off, repeating that they were there to gather information. He orders Lingot to comply and tell the truth. He wasn't to tell him more than what Hidden asked. If he determined his words to be lies, his punishments would only get worse. Lingot continues to say that he wasn't lying, but Hidden pierces the side of his mouth with his needle-like knife. Lingot cries out in agony. Hidden asks again what happened to the money. Lingot looks to the side and Hidden follows his eyes. Lingot admits that there wasn't any left because he used it all up in giving donations to the country and the royal family. Lingot says that Hidden must have made a mistake because he was a patriot who wouldn't willingly give all his money to the country. Hidden cuts him off again and points out that a newly ascended queen with no support wouldn't be able to grant someone a title as simple as that. Hidden didn't believe that all he did was make a donation. Lingot quickly defends himself, saying that he distributed the money among the bureaucrats as well. Internally, Hidden thinks that all of them were rotten to the core. Since the Count was a coward, he figured he would have a list of names. Lingot tells him to let him go since he already told him everything he needed to know. Raising his hand again, Hidden tells him to choose between his fingers or his nails. Hidden says that the soldiers already knew about Ibram's evil acts and they also knew about how he was impeding the business of people in the same trade. However, due to Lingot's pressure, they weren't able to put him to justice. It was only natural that Lingot should be punished too. Hidden asks him if he had any idea how many victims were made to amass the money that he received. Lingot had known what Ibram was doing, but not only did he accept the money after finding out, he continued to accept it and even helped accommodate him. The Count had let scum like him run free in the world. Hidden asks if he really believed all those things he had done could be forgiven. Lingot nervously agrees with him, saying that he really did all that. However, he would reflect on all of it. He says that he regretted all of it, and from now on he would spend the rest of his life atoning for it. Hidden cuts him off and says that it was exactly as the investigation turned out. There were too many people who saw him as a nuisance. With a single stab to his chest, he tells Lingot that he was going to die because he incurred the people's resentment. It doesn't take long for the light to leave Lingot's eyes. Hidden says that with that, they more or less wrapped everything up. Luna agrees, praising him for a job well done. The request had been to murder the Count and to obtain evidence of his wrongdoings. Scraping off the wallpaper, Hidden opens a safe that contains the contracts of Ibram and Lingot along with their signatures. He hands them over to Luna, who happily clapped her hands together. Reading the files, Luna says that Hidden really saved her because without the evidence, all their hard work would have been for nothing. Hidden asks why she didn't find a copy on Ibram and Luna explains that she killed him before heading anything about it. Because of that, they ended up displeasing the client and it nearly spiraled into a really big incident. Hidden asks why she didn't stop him from killing Count and Luna happily answers that she had full faith that he would find it. They head back out onto the balcony. Luna says that she would pass over the info to the client and she was sure that they would be able to deal with what came after pretty smoothly. Hidden thinks about the aftermath of a ruined Count's house. Luna interrupts his thoughts by asking if he wanted to know who the client was, and Hidden nervously says that he didn't want to. Luna ignores his words and announces that it was the Queen herself. Hidden says that he really wanted to avoid the worst-case scenario, at least assuming it would come down to that. Luna says that when it does happen, she would be counting on him. They leap off of the balcony. Back at the Dark Guild headquarters, the guild receptionist praises Hidden for a job well done, her tone respectful. Hidden asks where Luna was before adding that he wasn't important enough to be referred to in such a respectful manner. The receptionist points out that he would be marrying Luna, the boss, so she couldn't refer to him so plainly. She informs him that Luna was in her room. Apparently, a problem had occurred at one of their distant branches and she had been dealing with the issue since that morning. Hidden bids the receptionist farewell, saying that he would talk to Luna for a bit. However, before he can leave, a loud band echoes in the room and he turns around. The rough-looking men from before enter carrying a large bag together and Hidden asks what it was. One of the men thanked him for his hard work before saying that it was a thief that was doing a job at one of their distant branches, so they've actually kept Luna waiting. Hidden understands that what they meant was the information came before the package. Hidden says that he would come with them to deliver it to Luna. The man smiles at him, thanking him for his help. He adds that it was expected of Luna's future husband. He was even kind enough to be considerate of people like them. Hidden asks what the person in the bag did at the branch to have been brought in the way they were. The man says that the thief stole everything the hero party had and ran away. Hidden freezes, turning to the bag at his feet in disbelief. A few months back, after their conversation with Hidden and he had been exiled from the group, Linnea is the first to speak up. She couldn't believe that he was really gone. She thought he would change his ways if they talked to him. However, for her it just went to show what scoundrels adventurers were, but she quickly cuts herself off. Tiana's head was lowered, her face ridden with guilt. Linnea quickly apologizes to her, adding that she was different from the others. Tiana reassures her that it was fine because she was wrong about him too. Hidden wasn't like that before. Ashram says that they either had to divide his work among them or hire a new scout from the guild. Mira agrees with him. Ashram says that it'll be more work for them, but he was sure that their journey was almost over. He urges everyone to give it their all. They eventually move again and end up in another inn. Tiana exclaims in shock to hear that a room was worth 3 gold coins. The innkeeper asks if she had a problem with the price. Ashram asks her what was the matter since they could surely afford it. Mira agrees, saying that they've had a rough journey and they just needed to get some rest in their room. Lania adds that she would like to have a bath as soon as possible. Tiana remains deep in thought, reluctant about the price despite it being a nice inn. The innkeeper cuts into her thinking, saying that if she had a complaint then they could leave. He adds that the party wouldn't find a better inn than theirs and they were already being generous. As a final push, he says that they've got plenty of other customers who wanted to stay in the inn. Tiana finally agrees and gives him the coins. However, the man suddenly smirks and says that the bath cost extra. Eventually they enter their room. Once the door closes, Tiana calls for everyone's attention. She sets down their budget on the table and says that it was their monthly income from the royal family, along with the cash they had on hand and then the current cost of living in the town. Starting tomorrow, she wanted them to try and find the cheapest places possible. As for bathing, she urges them to use the public bathhouse instead. Linnea asks if they can't get some hot water somehow. Tiana points out that now that Hidden was gone, they also need to hire a new scout. As such, she would also like them to get some extra funds on hand if possible. Linnea says that if that was the situation, then they had no choice. Tiana thanks her for understanding. Internally, Tiana thinks that that would surely help them manage for now, but at the rate they were going, their funds would be depleted soon enough. She wonders if that was why Hidden was so ruthless about his price negotiations. However, she tells herself that that didn't give them the right to burden other people the way they did. Burden who, though? He was doing everyone a favor by lowering inflated prices. Crazy mental gymnastics there. Tiana purses her lips together anxiously. Suddenly, a clap rings out the room. Ashram thanks her for planning their next steps and asks if they should go look for a new party member at the guild. As they head out, Ashram says that their stay there might be extended until they find someone new. He adds that while they were out, they should also look for their new lodgings for the following days. Opening the doors to the guild hall, Ashram marches in and asks the people if they knew any possible scouts for hire. The man closest to the door points to a woman sitting at a nearby table. The woman looks up as Ashram comes closer. He introduces himself as one of the members of the hero party and fills her in that since one of them had to leave, they were looking for a new scout. He adds that he wanted her to manage their funds. Hearing his words, the woman freezes before she laughs lightly to herself. She gets up and offers a kind smile. She agrees to his conditions and they shake on it. He eventually leads her to their current inn and asks when she'd be ready. She points to the satchel she had on hand, saying that she was already packed. Ashram praises her and says that they were lucky to find such a skilled person on such short notice. Mira agrees, saying that it was thanks to his virtuous character. As they're talking, the scout casts them a cold glance from her seat at the table with all their funds. At the inn, Ashram greets the scout good morning as they are about to depart. Not hearing a response, Tiana pulls back the covers. Instead, what's on the bed is a wig and sack filled to resemble a human body. Ashram quickly leaves the room in complete disbelief. He goes back to the guild and asks about the scout. However, the men only laugh at him and say that the scout was a pro at scamming adventurers and that she was most likely gone and never coming back. Ashram goes pale at the news. Later on, their team is gathered around a table. Ashram has his head in his hands as he repeats that the scout had taken all of their funds. Mira is in disbelief that someone could do something like that, especially when she was under Ashram's protection. Linnea starts to rant about adventurers again, but Tiana quickly cuts in and says that they needed to find a way to raise some money. She says that although Ashram was reluctant, they needed to ask the royal family for additional funds. Ashram hesitantly agrees. Tiana asks if Linnea could also ask from her family, and she quickly agrees. "Hoo boy, that can't be good." She says that her father had never given them so much as a single copper coin before, so the least he could do was help them out in a time like this. Mira says that to pay for the letter, they would have to sell some of their unused equipment. Tiana softly agrees. Internally, she thinks that judging by the distance to the capital, it could take over a month for their funds to get to the town. Tiana then says that she would also like to cover their living expenses with guild work. However, since she was the only one with a license, she was the only one who could accept the well-paying jobs. However, with her current skills, she couldn't guarantee that she could complete them in one go. She guessed that they would have to earn money with the standard requests, like gathering medicinal herbs. Tiana calls for everyone's attention. Internally, she thinks of Hidden. He had done something unforgivable, so they had no choice but to expel him. They had left all the fundraising to him and maybe he was cutting corners for the sake of continuing their journey. However, Tiana thinks that they had also made it that far into their journey too. She clenches her fists and tells everyone that everything would be okay. If they all worked together, she believed that they could get through their current problem. They quickly get to work taking up jobs like collecting medicinal plants and submitting them to the guild for small pay. Half a month later, Tiana rushes into their room with a letter in hand and funds from the royal family. Ashram is relieved, saying that they could finally get moving again. Tiana hands a letter to Linnea. After reading the contents, Linnea is frozen in shock for a moment before she drops to her knees, making Tiana exclaim in a panic. Time passes and Linnea is in bed, motionless. Tiana informs Ashram that Linnea wouldn't come out of her room. Ashram says that he couldn't blame her. Not only was her father killed, his corruption was exposed and his estate was dissolved. However, Ashram says that they needed her strength for the journey. They couldn't wait forever, so until Linnea overcame her sorrow and returned to her senses, the rest of them just needed to make sure that they could stay there until then. Tiana asks if Ashram was able to take on subjugation requests now. Ashram says that he can only take simple ones, but it should earn them a decent amount of money. It seemed like Mira was able to find some work too, so they should be able to manage for a while. With that, Ashram bids Tiana goodbye, and Tiana tells him to be careful. Watching him go, she couldn't help but think how things had been so hard since Hidden was expelled. But through it all, Ashram had supported him so many times. A memory comes to mind of her kissing him. She knew that Mira admired Ashram too, but she can't help but think about Mira's current work. Oh no! Tiana wonders if Ashram knew how much stronger her feelings were for him. Picking up a pouch of coins, she remembers that since he was going out for a subjugation request, then he was sure to come back hungry. Thinking of making a slightly more elaborate meal today for Ashram, she leaves her staff behind and leaves the inn, unaware of the suspicious men following her. As she happily walks back home from her trip to town, still oblivious to her surroundings, she decides to take a shortcut into an alley. She passes by a doorway, unaware of it swinging open. Suddenly, multiple hands reach out towards her. One of them quickly covers her mouth to keep her from screaming. The hands drag her into the building. Okay, so we're making this as brief as possible because it's very much not a good scene, okay? Okay, be warned. A group of men cover her eyes and mouth with cloth and the door slams shut. They throw her to the ground. Her eyes quickly fill with tears behind the blindfold as the men surround her. She tries to cry out and call for help. Eventually, she's quickly overpowered by the group. Okay, that scene is done and over with. Time passes and Tiana is left alone in the rundown building. She struggles to sit up, clutching what remains of her clothes. Looking down at herself, she starts to cry softly. Back at the inn, Linnea approaches Ashram, apologizing for the trouble she caused and reassuring him that she was all right now. As they're talking, Mira turns to the door as it opens. She readily welcomes Tiana. However, she stops short, freezing in place as she notices Tiana's state. Upon entering the room, she collapses to the ground and screams, catching everyone off guard. Ashram asks in panic what happened to her. When he tries to reach out to her, Tiana smacks his hand away, screaming in despair. Mira tries to help her up from the ground. The room is in complete panic as Tiana sobs on the ground and the others are at a loss on what to do. Tiana wonders if this was her punishment, for crudely thinking about Mira's work in that manner. However, Tiana thinks that it was even from before that. She had failed to take Hidden's warnings seriously. She was the only one who could have sided with him back then, but she didn't even listen to what he was saying. Tiana was convinced that it was her punishment for betraying Hidden. With that thought in mind, Tiana gets up from the ground and throws up, making Mira panic even more. Time passes and Linnea wrings a towel on a bowl of water. Line says that it was all her fault for wallowing in self-pity. Curled up in bed, Tiana doesn't say anything. She curls her fist in anger. Suddenly, the door to the room opens and Ashram calls out to Linnea. They step out into the hall, closing the door behind them. Ashram hands a letter to Linnea saying it was from the royal family. She reads the contents and flinches in disbelief. It was an order to return to the capital. Apparently, the queen planned on making peace with the demon kingdom. She exclaims in disbelief, asking what was the point of their journey. Ashram says that he understood how she felt. However, they needed to accept that they had failed already. Mira asks Ashram what he planned on doing. Ashram suggests that they go home. Their journey ended there. Linnea tries to tell them that Tiana was still unwell. Ashram says that he would stay behind while Mira and Linnea headed back first to report to the queen. Linnea tries to argue, saying that she would stay behind for Mira instead, but their conversation is cut short when the door opens. Might not have been a good idea to have such a loud conversation right outside the patient's room, maybe? Mira tries to tell Tiana to stop pushing herself. She reassures them that she was fine. She apologizes for overhearing their conversation and asks if they were really returning to the capital. Ashram confirms it and says that she didn't have to push herself and either he or Linnea would stay behind for her. Linnea agrees with him and urges her to rest again. Tiana begs them to take her back with them since staying would only make her remember more. The group look at her in concern. Finally, Ashram agrees and says that they should all head back together. They start planning to make their way back. Mira tells Ashram that they should use the surplus funds to arrange a carriage back home. Ashram agrees, since taking a shared carriage might have more dangerous men. As they talk, Tiana apologizes internally for being so selfish. She wonders if Hidden was back in the capital or he had gone back to their hometown. Thinking back to happier days, she tearfully wishes that she would see Hidden again. Meanwhile, back at the Dark Guild, Hidden and the staff member from before arrive in Luna's room. She laughs merrily as she's heard the recent news. Hidden notices that Luna was happier than normal and she immediately goes to hug him. Luna says that the losers who kicked him out were finally getting what they deserved. She imagined it would happen, but she didn't think it would happen so quickly. Luna changes the subject and asks what they should do about their guest. It was the scout and the thief of the hero party who took all their funds. Bound tightly, she looks up at them fearfully. Meanwhile, at a palace, the queen thinks that it was time to pull the plug eventually. The man beside her asks if she was talking about the journey of the heroes party to defeat the demon lord. The queen agrees. From the very beginning, the heroes never had the strength to properly advance in their journey. It was only because of Hidden and Tiana that they approved the heroes' mission to defeat the demon lord in the first place. However, they ended up casting out the very man they hired for that purpose. The man beside her asks if things would have gone differently if they received aid from Lynia's family. The queen reasons that if the corrupted Ibram and Leingot were still alive, they might have harmed many more citizens and thrown the kingdom into complete turmoil. She restates that having them crushed was the right decision. In any case, what's done was done. They step forward and arrive at a pair of large doors, 2 knights guarding either side. She never thought that they would receive a formal invitation from the demon kingdom itself. From inside, a horned figure awaits them. The man beside the queen says that an offer of peace at a time like this was hardly convenient for them. The queen agrees with him, saying that the demons must have grasped their circumstances before making a move toward peace. It was a textbook example of statesmanship. The man secretly glances at the queen. She was wise, but she ascended the throne at a young age and lacked experience, allies, and everything else. As originally planned, they directed the public's attention abroad, and in that time they were able to remove the country's great tumor. The man supposed that they had no choice but to be satisfied with that. The queen says that in the future they should normalize their governance without resorting to such heavy-handed tactics. She figured that their relationship with Giftia would be a long one. She smiles sadly for a second. She turns to the man and says that whether she could overcome this problem or not would be the true test of her worth. With that, she beckons the man forward and they pass through the grand doors. The thief is slammed to the ground immediately in front of Hidden and Luna, forced to her knees. With tears in her eyes, she asks for their forgiveness. She argues that she had no idea that the boss of Giftia and her husband had ties to the heroes' party. Luna smiles at the thief, referring to Hidden as Luna's husband. Luna suddenly ponders the idea to make the thief Hidden's mistress, justifying it that Hidden was so insatiable for Luna to handle everything herself. If you don't understand that, that means you're too young. Foolishly, the thief's eyes brighten with fake hope. She immediately jumps at the opportunity, saying that she was willing to be Hidden's mistress or even just his slave. She continues to beg for her life, unaware of the cold look in Luna's eyes. Turning back to Hidden, she asks what he planned on doing. Hidden blankly requests for Luna to make things quick so the thief didn't suffer so much. The thief freezes at his words, shocked and confused. In the next second, one of Luna's men grabs the thief again. She starts begging for her life again as she's forcibly dragged out the room. Luna watches on with a satisfied smirk and Hidden remains quiet as the doors slam shut. He listens as the thief's scream grows fainter and fainter down the hall. Luna hums to herself before asking if what she did was fine. Hidden is confused until he feels her palm his pants. Luna says that he was getting all worked up seeing the thief. Walking over to the bed with Luna in his arms, Hidden says it was because she was clinging to him. Luna pretends not to believe him. Hidden places her on the bed and removes his coat. He tells her there was no way he would sleep with a woman he didn't trust. Luna hums merrily to herself as she looks up at him. She suddenly brings up that there was a report about what happened to Tiana in the slums. Clinging to Hidden one more time, she asks for his thoughts on the matter. Hidden says that although he couldn't trust her anymore, Tiana was still a childhood friend and her parents took care of him. At the very least, he felt sorry for her. Luna asks if he truly trusted her and Hidden reaffirms it, adding that it was her more than anyone. Hidden says that the day he would trust a woman other than Luna would probably never come. They share a kiss that eventually leads to more. As they spend the night together, Luna declares all the while that she would never leave Hidden. And in turn she begs him not to leave her again. Hidden silently kisses her one more time. Time passes and the heroes' party returns to the capital. The townspeople hear that it was because of a peace treaty signing ceremony with the Demon Lord's kingdom. They were told that the demons wouldn't be attacking them anymore, but many are in disbelief considering how many times they've been attacked by monsters. A cynical townsperson asks what was the purpose of sending the heroes on their journey in the first place. Another wonders what the queen was thinking. In the meantime, at the peace treaty signing, the human queen and the demon king sit on opposite sides of a meeting table with their trusted people on either side of them. The queen begins the meeting by expressing her gratitude for the opportunity to improve the strained relationship between their two nations. She also apologizes for the misconception about demons and her lack of awareness. The demon king reassures her that they understood her concerns and they also came there with the future in mind. As a token of sincerity, he gives her a research book concerning monsters. The Demon King says that if they find a way to control the monsters through their future exchanges, then it would be a great path towards the peace they were looking for. The Queen reads through the document. Monsters may have been descended from the demon race, but taxonomically they were wild animals the demons had no control over. The Demon King asks that the Queen make the information and where it came from known to all her subjects. She adds it into their treaty. The Queen says that the false belief that demons controlled monsters was a failing on her part and her ancestors. As such, they would work hard to correct it. The Demon King says that he had high expectations, looking over at the human nobles. He then adds that he would work to fix it as well, but where people gathered, so did corruption. The Queen agrees, and as she finishes writing down the details of the treaty, she says that they needed to join hands and eliminate their common enemy. The treaty was just the first step. She hopes that the treaty between them would become their foundation of peace. Later on, the Queen welcomes back Ashram and the rest, thanking them for their journey. The heroes' party knelt before the throne. The Queen tells them to feel at ease as she introduces them to the Demon King. The Demon King greets them when they raise their head, acknowledging how their kind used to be at odds with one another. However, Ashram quickly lowers his head, intimidated by the king despite the demon talking about peace between the kingdoms. Ashram quickly agrees. The Demon King suddenly notes that the team was missing a hero. The Queen looked troubled for a moment, but Ashram spoke first, saying that they parted ways. He explains that there were things they wouldn't agree on with Hidden. The Queen says it was a pity since she planned on giving Hidden a new task. The Demon King hums thoughtfully. He says that had the opportunity arose, he would have welcomed Hidden into the Demon Kingdom for being a warrior who defeated every assassin he sent after the hero's party. Ashram and the rest look up at him in shock to hear the king sent out assassins. The Demon King misunderstands Ashram's question, saying that there was no need for grudges when they had lost nearly 100 of their own. Internally, the Queen realizes that the party really didn't know about the assassins. She cuts in and tells the group that if there should be any grudges, it was her mistake to accept. Ashram reassures her it was unnecessary. The Queen changes subjects and says that the assassins weren't the only enemies the party had to face. She implies that although the more blatant nobles who left behind proof of their sins were dealt with, there were still some cases she hadn't fixed. Some of the other nobles in the room with them sweat nervously. At her words, Linea's face falls. She tries to ask about her father, but the Queen cuts her off. She tells Linea that her father was involved in other crimes as well. The Queen calls over a servant, taking a scroll from them. She hands it to Linea and tells her that if she was ready to know the truth, then she should read the contents. Linea resolutely agrees. The Queen tells that she wouldn't hold Linea accountable for her father's crimes, but if she wanted her family's name cleared, she expected Linea to serve the crown with absolute loyalty and the people with absolute sincerity. With that, she then says that that was the end of their rather grim conversation. With the return of the heroes' party and the start of the new era of peace, the Queen announces that they would celebrate with a grand banquet. Meanwhile, at the Dark Guild Japhetia, Luna rummages through her closet, announcing to Hidden that he was attending the banquet with her. As Hidden shrugged on his shirt, he commented that he wasn't too thrilled about the idea. Luna argues that she wasn't thrilled about it either, but their interests were aligned for the meantime. She reasons that it was better to save the Queen some face now than to refuse and attract attention later on. Hidden asks if it was better for him to stay away for the meantime as he abandoned the Queen's orders halfway through. Luna argues that it was already proven that the heroes' party was simply incompetent. She adds that since the heroes were meeting the Demon King face to face, it would be weird for them to single Hidden out. Hidden thinks about her words more. He was from the frontier, an adventurer, and a member of an underground organization, so it only made sense that he would feel out of place. Luna scoffs and says that she felt out of place too. Hidden points out that that wasn't true and she begrudgingly agrees. Caught speechless, Luna puffs her cheeks and tackles Hidden back to bed. She finally admits that the reason she was invited to the event was for a political marriage. Hidden is confused until Luna explains that she was probably meant to be married off to some noble pretty boy and get Giftia under their control. Luna reassures Hidden that she had no plans on falling for anyone other than him, but she couldn't stand the idea of guys being all over her during the banquet. Hidden stares at her for a while, checking to see if she was telling the truth. Finally, Hidden holds Luna properly in his arms. Understanding the situation, or doing his best to anyway, he asks Luna if he should kill anyone who got close to her. Luna laughs and says that although that wasn't what she meant, she appreciated the thought. Luna says that she would introduce him as her fiancé. Hidden agrees, promising that he wouldn't leave her side. Eventually, the day of the banquet arrives and the heroes' party make their way into the hall. Luna and Hidden make their way in together as well. Luna comments that the banquet, despite being used as a place to make connections, was full of people who were obviously not discussing anything important. Hidden agrees, saying that it was just enough to get a rough idea of the power dynamic. That aside though, Luna admits that the palace's wine really was on another level. Suddenly a voice speaks up, thanking Luna for her help the other day. Luna turns around annoyed, but the expression quickly disappears when she sees that it was the Queen. She jokingly says that they were honored that the Queen came all the way to their table to thank them. The Queen laughs before she notices Hidden right beside Luna. He quickly stands up and politely apologizes for not finishing his job as a hero. The queen reassures him that she was able to hear what happened. She tells Hidden that she's been wanting to speak to him, so she was glad that he was doing well. Hidden bows respectfully. Seeing him act so politely, Luna bursts into small fits of laughter, earning her a side-eye from Hidden. The queen watches their interaction and comments that Luna and Hidden seem to have a close relationship. Luna smiles cheekily and says that she and Hidden have known each other since he came to the capital, which explains why he came to her for help. The queen smiles knowingly. She tells Luna that she was hoping to welcome her into the royal court and entrust her with a position. However, Luna cuts her off, saying she was happily engaged with Hidden. The queen congratulates her and turns to leave. However, behind her, a young man bows politely to Luna and Hidden. Luna thinks that the queen had really played her cards to have tried to have an arranged marriage set for Luna and the third son of the Marquis. Waving goodbye to the Marquis' son, Luna comments that the young master was most likely thinking he was saved from the marriage now that Luna was already engaged. Hidden watches her for a short while and then the warm smile on the Marquis' son's face. He comments that it was probably the other way around, making Luna confused. Their conversation is interrupted when someone approaches. The imposing figure of the Demon King towers over Hidden as he greets him. The Demon King apologizes to Hidden for being the only one to come see him, as not all of the demons have a positive opinion of Hidden. Hidden says that it was only expected, especially if he really did kill all the demon assassins. And Luna laughs, saying that Hidden wasn't one for pulling his punches. They take a seat at Luna and Hidden's table. The Demon King thanks Hidden for being understanding. He says that among all the assassins he had sent over, there was one who was truly adept among all of them. She happened to be his niece and the demon he wanted them to talk about. Hidden remembers his fight with the Flower Girl assassin in the middle of town, which inevitably led everything to hell for him, that's for sure. The Demon King expresses that it was the first time the girl had ever had an opponent of equal skill. Apparently she wanted to meet with Hidden again given the chance. The Demon King adds that should Luna want to come along as well, she was welcome to, as he believed Luna and the assassin girl would get along well. Luna raises a glass to him, understanding the other reason he had visited them. The Demon King laughs boisterously, saying that he couldn't exactly hide anything from them. He finally admits that he wanted to ask if Hidden would be interested in working for the Demon Kingdom. Although he knew that some weren't fond of Hidden, he thought he should still extend out a greeting soon. Luna merrily slaps Hidden's back over and over, teasing him for being popular enough to get another scouting offer. Hidden admits that it was a tempting offer, but he couldn't offer a proper answer at the moment. He suggests that there may be a better way he could be of use to the Demon King. The Demon King agrees and says that they should talk again once their situations have stabilized. With a pleased smile, he gets up and leaves Hidden and Luna be. Luna teases Hidden again for being so popular, and Hidden tries to take her glass of wine, convinced she was drunk. Their joyous moment is interrupted when a group approaches their table again and they both stop and look up. Leading the hero's party, Ashram asks Hidden how he's been doing. Luna doesn't bother hiding her annoyance to see the hero's party, despite Hidden greeting them pleasantly enough. From behind Ashram, Tiana blinks at the sight of Luna. She hesitantly asks Hidden who she was. Hidden explains that during his time accepting a few private requests back in his adventuring days, Luna was his employer back then. While she was his employer again now, Luna cuts in and introduces herself as his lover and fiancé. Tiana's face falls. She was confused on what was going on. Not only did Hidden have a lover, but now they were even engaged. Even though it's only been 6 months since they parted ways and Tiana had gone through something very traumatizing, she couldn't make sense of it. She wonders if Hidden had been cheating on her since back when they still spent time together, which is a funny sentence considering I'm pretty sure they were never an item. Tiana couldn't help but feel stupid that she was the only one worried about him and she was the only one agonizing over the whole thing, which is funny again considering she abandoned him. Gesturing to their table, Hidden asks everyone to take a seat. Settled in, Ashram is the first to speak up. He asks if they really were the ones in the wrong. Hidden doesn't hold back and reaffirms it, pointing out that no one was ever motivated by purely goodwill. He asks if Ashram and the others finally understood what he meant when he said it was a necessary evil. Luna says that it was a good thing that the journey was called off. If they had kept going, she was pretty sure everyone would have been wiped out quickly. After all, their party recruited swindlers and thieves without a second thought. Hidden says that they could all use it as a learning experience and asks what they were all planning on doing now. Hidden says that although they reached a peace accord with the Demon Kingdom, monsters were still a threat to the kingdom, so he doubted the power to fight monsters would go to waste. Ashram answers first, saying that he was planning on becoming a soldier to serve the country. Hidden says that he would probably be granted knighthood, but Ashram says that being a knight didn't exactly suit him. Instead, Linnea seemed to have decided on staying as a knight. She says that because Linnea defied the will of the kingdom and pursued his own interests, she would clear her family name by remaining loyal to the kingdom. Mira says that she would stay with the church, making both Luna and Hidden exclaim in surprise at the same time. They stare at her incredulously and Mira is confused. Hidden is the first to look away, wishing her good luck. Luna whispers to him, pointing out that Mira wasn't the least bit ashamed. Hidden suggests that maybe Mira didn't consider chastity and faith to be on the same level, and that maybe for her prostitution was an act of charity filled with loving kindness. That takes quite the mental gymnastics to get to that conclusion. Either way, Hidden was starting to understand why Mira was chosen as the saintess. Catching Tiana's eyes, Hidden asks her what she was planning next and if she would continue to be an adventurer if she was staying in the capital. Tiana admits that she was planning on heading back to their shared home village. Hidden asks if Ashram was fine with her choice and he plainly says that Tiana had her own circumstances, so he couldn't exactly stop her. Hidden knew that after what happened to Tiana, even though she was working with Ashram, it only made sense that she couldn't stand being around men. Calmly taking a sip of his wine, Hidden comments that things would be lonely, but he asks that she give his regards to her parents for him. Hesitantly, Tiana asks if Hidden would like to go back to their village with her. Instantaneously, Luna's mouth twitches. She explodes in anger almost immediately, asking what Tiana was suddenly asking. Tiana tries to say that it had nothing to do with her, but Luna yells that Hidden was already her fiancé. The table is quiet for a moment. Luna loses her cool and says that just because Tiana was kidnapped and dumped by the hero, she didn't have the right to want to go back with Hidden. She asks if Tiana had any shame in her. Hidden tries to calm her down and she goes quiet for a moment. Tiana asks if Hidden already knew about what happened to her in the slums and everything else. Hidden explains that all sorts of information ended up coming to Luna. Ashram tries to explain that it was all one misunderstanding. He defends Tiana and says that she wanted to do some self-reflection back at home and it wasn't about being dumped or doing any dumping. Ashram tries to reaffirm that they were never in that kind of relationship. Tiana agrees with him and says that Ashram had supported her through Hidden leaving the party and nothing happened between them at all. Hidden frowns but remains quiet. Luna leans in with a cruel smirk and says that Tiana had guts to say that when all sorts of information were able to reach Luna. To prove a point, she pointed a finger at her lips and Tiana froze. As a last resort, Tiana asks about Hidden and Luna and how they got engaged in such a short amount of time. She accuses that they were probably in a relationship long before Tiana and Hidden fell off, but she's cut off when a glass of wine is thrown right at her face. Finally having had enough, Luna gets up from her chair and asks Tiana what she knew about the truth. She yells that if it weren't for Tiana, Hidden would have been hers a long time ago. In a shaky voice filled with anger, she says that no matter how many times she hit on Hidden or asked him to go out with her, he had always turned her down because he had Tiana already. Tiana is speechless the more Luna raises her voice. Hidden tries to hold her back, but Luna threatens Tiana, telling her that the more she disrespected Hidden, the more she felt like killing her. Tiana is in complete shock. Hidden pulls Luna into his arms and apologizes to her. Luna breaks down into tears asking why he was apologizing for a girl like Tiana. Hidden reaffirms to Luna that it had nothing to do with Tiana but because she was important to him. Tiana watches them with a broken look on her face. Looking up at the heroes' party, Hidden asks for them to give him and Luna a moment as he wanted to think only about her in the moment. Ashram and the rest, who had been watching them since the fight, slowly start to get out of their seats. Before leaving them be, Tiana asks Hidden one final time if they could have had a chance together if she didn't go through something so traumatic, but Hidden cuts her off immediately. He says that the moment she abandoned him, his feelings for her also died and nothing after that would have mattered. He says that everything he had left was to be dedicated to Luna. When he had nothing left, when he was broken, and when he came back running on fumes and false bravado, she was the one who saved him. Looking down at a sobbing Luna, Hidden says that she was his everything. Luna hiccups and stutters, trying to say something to Hidden, and he patiently waits for her. The heroes' party eventually turns to leave them be, Tiana casting them one final glance. She sees the display of affection between Hidden and Luna and finally turns around, wishing them happiness. Later on, Luna collapses on the grassy floors of the outdoor garden, tears still dripping down her face. Luna apologizes to Hidden for losing control of herself back inside the banquet. Hidden kneels beside her, trying to get her to listen to something he wanted to say. Luna frantically brushes away at her tears, saying that what just happened was all her fault. But Hidden cuts her off, holding onto her hand and saying that she was wrong. Luna stops crying for a moment to look up at him. She starts to sob harder and begs him not to leave her. Hidden is confused, but Luna smiles sadly at him. She says that although he would most likely be fine without her, she couldn't live without him anymore. She clings to him and begs him to stay again. Hidden internally calls himself an idiot for not noticing Luna's anxieties and for not being able to tell her anything. Although he felt like he would be unable to live without Luna as well, he wonders if he's been able to show her that at all. Cupping her cheek in his hand, he tells her he loves her, much to Luna's shock. Hidden admits that she was the one who gave him the strength to live and spoke words that he couldn't. Luna had made a place for him to call home and it had made him so happy. He was expelled from his party, and despite holding on to the resentment and hatred and swallowing it all down, Luna was the one who filled the hole that was left in his heart. Hidden truly believed that it wouldn't be strange at all for her to reject him. He couldn't express to her enough how accepting him had saved him. Hidden says that he was glad Luna was there with him and he would say it as many times as it took. She was his everything and he loved her more than anything. He couldn't bear it if she wasn't there with him and there was no way he would ever leave her side. Kneeling in front of a speechless Luna, Hidden asks her to marry him, saying that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. With happy tears in her eyes, Luna smiles brightly, accepting his proposal and thanking him. Time passes and a lone figure makes her way through the forest. Upon reaching a clearing atop a cliff, Tiana stares down at the view of her home village in the distance. A memory comes to mind. A rabbit stops dead in its tracks as something sharp and thin passes clean through its head. Hidden and Tiana make quick work of a pack of rabbit monsters. Tiana and Hidden share a smile as they work efficiently. Eventually, they take care of the monsters ravaging the fields. Tiana says that between the two of them they should be able to make a living even if they leave the village. Heading back into the road, Hidden says that it was a 2 or 3 day walk to the nearest inn in town. Tiana adds that from there they would take a carriage to the capital. Hidden notes that life in the capital was sure to be hard, and he asks again if Tiana was sure about her decision. Tiana smiles and reaffirms her answer. She wanted to be with him. Back in the present, Tiana makes her way into the village alone. Her parents greet at the door, happy to have her back and glad to see her safe. She smiles warmly at them. Setting her stuff down in her room, her parents follow her at the doorstep. She apologizes for showing up without notice and having failed to send a letter for the longest time. Her father says that the important thing was that she returned to them safely. Tiana smiles, touched by their comforting words. Her father says that they regularly received her letters up until 6 months ago, and then it stopped. Her mother adds that they were really worried, but Tiana is surprised and confused. She didn't understand what they meant by frequent letters only ending 6 months back. Her parents are equally confused by her reaction. For a while after leaving the village, Tiana was so homesick that she sent letters frequently. However, she stopped sending them the year before the Demon King's subjugation quest. She couldn't understand the messy timeline of events. Her mother smiles and says that they kept all the letters she sent them. Not only that, but the remittance she sent over was a big help to them. Tiana is even more confused. Her mother said that she even sent money to the village chief to help with the village's provisions, adding that everyone was so grateful. Her father agrees, saying that some village folk might stop by to say their thanks if they hear that she was back in the village. Tiana laughs awkwardly, saying she wouldn't know what to do if they did just that. She wonders if someone had started to impersonate her by sending letters and money, and yet she couldn't figure out why they would do that in the first place. Her father brings back a huge pile of letters for her to see. Tiana remembers that she had started sending letters right around the time she arrived in the capital, reminiscing about the memories. Her father agrees, saying that they were so worried because she seemed to be struggling to adjust to her new life. She opens one of the recent letters and her face immediately falls to find that the handwriting was Hidden's. Her parents remember that it was around the time that Tiana had supposedly injured her hand. According to the letters, Tiana had asked Hidden to write her letters even after her hand had healed simply because it was easier. They tell her that she should have been more grateful to Hidden. Tiana realizes that Hidden had been pretending to be her, writing updates to her family and sending money back home in place of her. That is, up until he was expelled from the hero's party. Tiana couldn't understand why Hidden had done all of it and why he had never told her. Crumpling the letter in her hands, she falls to her knees. Tiana sobs as she tries to apologize to Hidden. Meanwhile, Linnea stood before the gated estate of her family. She stares up at the grand building, a conflicted look on her face. In the end, the world she had been living in was nothing but an illusion. The numerous crimes of Langot, deceiving the people all this time, were brought to light and their house was disbanded. She wonders who had obtained the documents that served as proof and then killed her father, but she had her suspicions. She was sure that it was Hidden. Meanwhile, Ashram puts on a set of armor, a dejected look on his face. Internally, he thinks that Hidden was right. He should have been more cautious of the evil within people. He had told himself that it had nothing to do with him, and he looked away from the evil that was right beside him. As a result, he had ended up banishing Hidden from their party. Linnea thought that back then the party really did have the resolve to protect the people. To bear a false name in secret and kill someone the way that Hidden had, Linnea couldn't have done it, even if she was ordered to. But Hidden had that resolve. Linnea had nothing to say to him anymore. However, once she had cleared her name, she would offer him her apology and gratitude. Later on at the Dark Guild Jafita, Luna's clothes are carefully laid out on the bed. She mutters that the joke was taken a little too far. Hidden looks up to see Luna standing before him, embarrassed as she wore a wedding dress. She says that it was ironic that someone like her was wearing a pure white wearing dress. Hidden quickly disagrees, saying that angels and goddesses were meant to look good in white, and Luna was his goddess. Luna freezes in shock, the red on her cheeks refusing to go away. She asks him incredulously if his personality had completely changed. Hidden worriedly asks if he should tone it down. Luna says that she didn't quite mind, but sitting on Hidden's lap it was turning her on. Hidden kisses her forehead, saying that her crude choice of words worked just fine for him. When he pulls away, he says that Luna was the most beautiful person in the world, and that meant he was the luckiest man in the world. Brother just cranked up the Riz factor to a straight 100. Luna exclaims that he surely changed too much. Unbeknownst to them, their racket could be heard by the staff below them who were pretending not to hear. There's a pause between them before Hidden brings up that he wanted to ask her a question. Luna teases Hidden, asking if he wanted to know the secret to her beauty. Hidden blankly says that although he would love to hear it, he was sure that she didn't have to do anything to be beautiful. Brother is being way too smooth. Luna quickly changes the subject, asking what he really wanted to ask. Hidden admits that he didn't know what part of himself she fell for. If there was a reason, he wanted to know. Luna smiles softly at his question. She began to laugh as she thought of a good explanation. She says that although she was going to leave out some key details, the biggest reason was that he looked so miserable. That's definitely one way to look for your soulmate. Hidden looks at her incredulously. Luna immediately falters at his reaction, scrambling for a good explanation. Hidden reassures her that he would wait for her answer. Luna explains that Hidden looked like he had completely written off his happiness. She adds that Hidden looked like he was fine with everything as long as everyone else was happy. Luna says that she was able to relate to that the very first time they met, as she was a bit of a goody two-shoes herself back then as well. Cupping Hidden's cheek, she continues that the feelings she felt slowly turned into certainty the more they spent time together. Hidden says that even now Luna was a good person, and she exclaims that that wasn't what she wanted to hear from him. She puffs out her cheeks at him for a moment before continuing that since then she decided that she would make Hidden the happiest person in the world. With that, she leans in and kisses him deeply. Eventually, time passes in a flash and it's 2 years later. At the royal capital, a loud voice rings out through the plaza. It says that the knowledge brought from the Demon Kingdom had truly brought immense profit to their nation, but ever since the peace treaty was signed, tools made with monster materials have become widespread. Surrounding townspeople listen with complete focus. A preacher concludes that the peace accord and the culture exchange was nothing but an invasion by the Demon Kingdom. The townspeople start to grow uneasy, wondering if it was true. If the demons really were connected to the monsters and they cut off the supply, they would be in big trouble. Suddenly, a soldier yells from the edge of the crowd, telling everyone to calm down as the man's words were nothing but baseless accusations. The soldier in question was Ashram. A few moments before, a group of soldiers marched down the streets of the royal capital. The one leading them says that it was their turn to speak up. A group of preachers were giving a speech in the square, claiming the current peace treaty was an invasion by the demons. The other soldiers chat amongst themselves as they walk. One of them comments that if it was the usual crowd, they never seemed to learn their lesson. Another says that if they tied them down, the preachers would quickly go quiet. A soldier at the front warns the other two of their words. At the far back of the group of soldiers, Ashram listens as one of the soldiers says that it was only the truth that they needed to beat the preachers badly to teach the bad guys a lesson. Ashram's face was pained as he listened to the conversation. 2 years had passed since the signing of the peace treaty with the Demon Kingdom. It had been 2 years since they failed to defeat the Demon King. Since then, Ashram had protected the country as a military police officer in the capital. They eventually reached the square with the group of preachers. As the other soldiers quickly subdued the group, Ashram worked hard to reassure the crowd that the kingdom was working hard to improve the lives of all the citizens. He continues to say that their relationship with the Demon Kingdom was an element of that and nothing else. The surrounding townspeople continued to talk amongst themselves, still uneasy. Ashram wondered if the crowd even believed what he was saying. Suddenly, the preacher giving the speech called out to Ashram from the ground. Recognizing him as the hero, Ashram freezes in place. The man mocks Ashram, saying that the hero who was meant to oppose the Demon Kingdom was now nothing more than a patrolman, calling it a downfall. Ashram stays quiet, his expression pained. He watches silently as his fellow soldiers bound the group and led them away. The day eventually comes to an end. While other soldiers call out to Ashram to join them for drinks, he turns them down and makes his way back home. Ashram knew that the preacher was right. He had set out on a journey to defeat the Demon King and failed. Worse than that, he had hurt so many precious people along the way. Back then, around the time their journey began to fall apart after they banished Hidden, and as he supported Tiana through their journey, which had drastically become harder, he found himself falling for her. He knew that Hidden was her boyfriend, which is the first time I'm hearing about, not gonna lie, so Ashram never intended to come between them. But from the way she acted, he could tell that it was already over with Hidden, especially after the kiss they shared. That was why, as the person closest to her back then, he should have been the one to protect her. However, he could only watch from the sidelines as Linnea and Mira did what they could after what happened to Tiana. When that happened, he was determined to do everything he could to help her heal, but all he could do was earn money for their daily expenses, until the order to return finally came from the royal family. In the end, he couldn't do a single thing. Ashram eventually reached his modest home and set his stuff down. He sat down on a stool and sighed heavily. He guessed nothing really changed in just 2 years. He was constantly reminded of the difference between himself and Hidden. The day of the banquet, sometime after they had returned to the capital, Ashram finally learned that the one Tiana truly wanted was Hidden. He felt powerless, able to do nothing more than watch from the sidelines. Ashram felt a maddening jealousy towards Hidden. At that time, he realized he wasn't nearly as good a person as he had imagined. He thinks he might have finally understood what Hidden had said. There were plenty of people filled with malice. Since he understood that, he's seen countless criminals, but he still had no idea how to tell the good people from the bad. Ashram's values were completely shattered and he couldn't keep up with his new reality. For the past 2 years, he spent most of his time alone. He barely even talked to Mira and Linnea except when they happened to run into each other. Ashram had become unable to place his heartfelt trust in anyone. He couldn't help but wonder, had he not banished Hidden that day, would he have been able to go on living as his old self? He who trusted people ended up alone. And Hidden, who suspected people, was now surrounded by them. The difference in their situations made him sick with envy. Ashram laughed bitterly to himself. He knew that he just couldn't be Hidden. Finishing his drink, he settles back into bed as he had to wake up early the next day. Closing his eyes, he hopes that he doesn't have the same nightmare he always did. Meanwhile, in the palace, Linnea looks up as a servant of the queen calls for her, stating that she had been given a chance at redemption. Walking down the palace halls, the servant fills her in on the details. Reminding her of the group of preachers being rounded up in the Capitol Plaza, he states that the royal family could not condone such organized movements, nor could they sit idly by. The servant continues, telling Linnea that the fighting had been a concern ever since they made peace with the Demon Kingdom. The queen had also been taking measures, albeit not publicly. Until now, they had been relying on an organization called Giftia, but they cannot assume that their boss Luna would continue to act in their favor indefinitely. The queen valued Hidden's skills as someone who could rival her, and had hoped to establish a new department centered around him. However, Hidden had left the journey midway through, and before the queen could grasp the situation, he was recruited by Gifita and is now serving as Luna's right-hand man. It was a major blow for the royal kingdom, but Luna taking him in reaffirmed for the queen that her judgment and aims were not mistaken. Without straying from that course, the servant says that the queen wanted to conduct Giftia-like activities as a department within the royal palace. The department would handle the palace's dirty work. Their original plan has always been to secure and strengthen their personnel for that goal. Linnea thinks about the goal of eliminating those who threaten the people. Agents who handled such works were operating in the shadows directly under the queen's command. Linnea had heard rumors, but it seemed like they were true. All information regarding their existence had been buried in darkness. Linnea thinks that perhaps that was the origin of the name they came to be called, a Dark Knight. Finally kneeling before the queen, Linnea asks her point blank if that was what she wanted her to become. The queen says that had Linnea been the same still as back then, she wouldn't have reached out to her. But as she was currently, the queen believed she could fulfill the duty admirably. Linnea didn't even need to think about the answer. If the queen had commanded it, it was a knight's duty to obey. As a knight and a noble, she had dedicated herself to her training, believing she was second to none. But she learned the reality of being protected by someone she looked down on. She lost her family home and realized that all her honor up to that point had been an illusion. But ever since their failure to defeat the Demon King, she had striven to serve the country without giving up her knighthood. With a resolute look in her eyes, Linnea internally swears to clear her dirtied name with her own actions. As a knight, she would show her resolve to protect the people right then and there. The queen calls out to Linnea, asking for her acceptance right then and there. Linnea bows her head lower and says that she would accept her new position. The queen is pleased by her answer. She says that the kingdom was able to avoid the loss of an excellent knight. However, Linnea's expression is rather conflicted. The queen laughs. She tells Linnea that what they just discussed should not be spoken to anyone outside the room. If Linnea was to be interrogated about the truth of their affair, she wasn't allowed to use the queen's name. She was a knight that now lived through the shadows. Linnea gives her confirmation before asking who she should report to for her duties. The queen reassures her that there was a director. Linnea looks up. Almost instantly, a blade is pressed to her throat, a cloaked figure standing behind her with a smile. Linnea doesn't budge an inch. The cloaked figure removes their hood. They say that they were wondering when Linnea would notice, but she was rather slow on the uptake. They ask if Linnea would be able to work in the shadows at the state she was currently in. Linnea watches as the person removes their blade and returns it back to its sheath. Linnea was sure that they were the director of the Dark Knights. The director hums thoughtfully. Giving Linnea a once-over, the director observes that she had a well-trained body. If she had moved even a little bit, Linnea would surely have been cut. The director continues that she had a solid core and the mental fortitude to stay still despite her fear. As such, they give her a passing grade. Linnea casts her a glance, saying that she was humbled by the praise. Linnea asks for their name but quickly takes her words back. Reassuring her that it was fine, the director says that it wasn't even their real name and only one of countless others. The director's name was Onyx. Linnea says that their name was rather on the nose, but Onyx argues that they weren't the one to pick it. The other choice was Ikasumi, which quite blatantly means squid ink. The queen clears her throat, calling them back to business. She says that they had two objectives. One, they were to find the mastermind of the organization of the group opposing the peace treaty. And the second, they were to destroy the core of the operation unit. Onyx reassures the queen that they had narrowed down the list of suspects on who could be the mastermind, so now they just needed to hit the operation unit at the same time. Onyx says that the operation unit was a very public position, so it made it difficult for them to engage them directly. That was when Linnea would come in. Linnea asks if she was meant to crush the unit on her own, and Onyx reassures her that she wouldn't. They say that for Linnea to operate as a creature of the shadows, Linnea lacked the experience, skill, and just about everything else. The queen vouches for her abilities, and Onyx says that they trusted her judgment. They say that they've already requested external collaborators for the mission. Linnea would work with the collaborators and learn the necessary skills along the way. Onyx then bids Linnea goodbye, saying that the Dark Knights were always shorthanded. They turn and head towards the door with a wave goodbye. Linnea tries to call out to them, still wanting to ask questions, but they ignore her. The Queen asks if Linnea knew the district on the southwest edge of the capital where the residential and entertainment areas mixed. Linnea was to go to the office there and show them a ring given to her by the Queen. They should know what it means. Finally, the Queen informs her that the external collaborators would be the organization Giftia and Hidden. Linnea freezes in place. Time passes and the Queen meets with the Demon Lord again. She notes that it had been 2 years since their peace treaty was established. The number of people traveling between the human and demon nations had grown tens of times from what it was before. She was sure that it was likely the result of the trust built by the Accords as well as the various knowledge brought from Argandia, which had eased their aversion to them. Humming thoughtfully, the Demon Lord notes that as expected, the number of people using the open diplomacy as a cover for their misdeeds had also increased. The Demon Lord expects the Dark Guild Giftia to become a powerful peacekeeping organization that will connect and maintain the peace between their nations. Giftia had finally established a branch at the Demon Kingdom. Hidden and Luna were currently at the Demon Kingdom branch. Luna's voice echoed as she exclaimed in disbelief that they already had another job in the Queen's Kingdom when they had just finished the last one. Before she could explode even more, Hidden tells her to calm down. He understood where Luna was coming from, but he told their demon helper, Raija, to let them know of the details. Before getting into the details of their next mission, Raija praises Hidden for their excellent work on the last job. She smiles as she says that the way they dismantled the Thieves Guild was magnificent. Raija then bows respectfully and informs them that she already had a magical carriage prepped for them. She calmly urges them to take a break during the journey, but Luna yells angrily at how Raija was acting like they already accepted the mission. Raija says that despite Luna's words, the guild had already received a document signed by both the Demon Lord and the Queen. She hands them the files and Hidden looks them over. Luna angrily curses, saying she wanted to refuse the mission, but Hidden points out that they've just established their position there at the Demon Kingdom. To show that they could easily handle requests from the Demon Lord, they really couldn't turn down the job. Raija calmly tells them that the details of the mission were summarized in the files she gave them. However, the moment she suggests that they read the files on their way back to the Queen's Kingdom, Luna explodes in her face, pointing out that she had told them to take a break in the carriage just a moment ago. Hidden and Luna flip through the files detailing the mission quickly. With a muffled curse, Luna complains how easy Raija had made the details to understand. Raija graciously accepts her praise, despite how aggressive it was delivered. Continuing to read through the document, Hidden notes that Raija had even looked into the finer details of the mission, such as the operations unit for the group opposing the peace treaty. He thanks her for her work and Raija's eyes widen. She smiles brightly, saying that if it was to lessen Hidden's burden, then it was the least she could do. At her words and expression, Luna immediately explodes in anger, if she isn't already angry enough anyway. Hugging Hidden's side, she says that Hidden was hers and she warns Raija from looking at him in such a loving manner. Raija quickly tries to reassure Luna that she simply admired Hidden from a purely professional standpoint. Luna disagrees, saying that it was clear what she was doing. Meanwhile, Hidden continues to pore over the mission files. According to the files, their new target was an adventurer from the guild. After the peace treaty with the Demon Kingdom, the daily lives of the citizens had changed dramatically. Technological innovations flowing in from the Demon Kingdom improved people's lives. However, nobles and merchants who suffered losses as a result pooled their funds to create a reactionary group. At the lowest level of the Cabal was an operations unit made up of thugs and delinquents, and it seemed like their ace member had been interfering with the activities of Giftia as well. Their job was to crush that ace unit. While being registered with the guild and belonging to an adventurer's inn, the target was part of the shady Cabal at the same time, and seemed to be working diligently for them behind the scenes. They preached the dangers of the demon race to sway public opinion, and at times they didn't hesitate to use violence to oppress and harm demons. There was no doubt that they were an enemy to peace and all that. Reading through more of the details, Hidden notes that they weren't given a lot of time as the deadline was a month, including travel time back. Raija tries to reassure them that she made meticulous arrangements to ensure that it wouldn't be a burden to them, but Luna cuts in, saying that that wasn't the biggest problem, adding that Raija should give them a vacation. Hidden asks Luna if there was anything else she didn't like about the mission's terms besides the tight schedule. Luna points out the person in the dispatched personnel slot. She says that the person was listed as their support. However, it was a condition that they must take the person into the field with them. Not only that, but they were strictly ordered to have the person follow their instructions. Luna complains that they were most likely trying to get the person some training experience. In the end, they would be carrying dead weight around with them. Hidden agrees that their higher-ups just wanted to have their support gain some kind of experience. He figured they couldn't keep up with personnel development within the palace. Leaning closer to Hidden, Luna points out the familiarity of the support they were given. Hidden reassures Luna not to worry about him since it was just a name he hasn't heard in a while. Luna makes him promise that if he didn't like these circumstances, Hidden would tell her straight away. Patting her head, Hidden promises not to lie to her, nor to fake his bravado. Seeing Raija staring at them, Luna sticks her tongue out at her, making the demon sigh in exasperation. Eventually, Hidden and Luna head back to the Queen's kingdom. On the carriage home, Luna comments that she found Raija impossible, and suggests that they fire her soon. Hidden points out that even if she said that, there was no demon on site with more connections than Raija. Luna knew that, but she hated the way Raija looked at Hidden, adding that she had no morals. Funny thing to say about a demon, but I guess they work differently in this world. Hidden disagrees that Raija meant things in the way Luna was implying. He thinks that his relationship with Raija was one where they've put their lives on the line. Raija was the demon assassin who pretended to be a flower seller in town while Hidden still traveled with the hero's party. Hidden suggests that Raija was just a demon interested in a human who could fight a demon head-on and survive. Luna puffs out her cheeks indignantly at his words. She angrily turns away from him and doubles down that Raija was completely serious. She argued that if Raija had the chance, she would steal Hidden from Luna, and given the slightest opening, she would have his children. Well, that escalated quickly. As she says that it could obviously be seen in her eyes, Hidden remains quiet for a moment. He quickly pulls Luna into his lap, much to her surprise. He kisses her, apologizing for making her anxious. Luna tries to speak, but she's quickly muffled. Hidden tells Luna that she was the only one for him and the only one he'd consider having a family with. Luna breaks off their kiss and says that once their branch office was officially established, they would start running things from headquarters. Until then, she promises to shower him with affection. Hidden expresses that he was looking forward to it, and their carriage continues on. Eventually, they arrive back in the main headquarters of Giftia. The receptionist welcomes them back as they enter. Hidden asks one of their staff if anything unusual happened besides what they heard from the monthly report. The man greets him and reassures him that everything was perfectly peaceful. As Hidden and Luna head to the second floor, Hidden thinks that if the faction related to the mission really existed, something should be happening. But there was no sign that Giftia had been troubled. Hidden comes to the conclusion that either they had an insider or they were being pressured. He decides to look into the matter later. The moment they enter their room, Luna collapses onto the bed, exhausted. Hidden decides to make some time for Luna to properly get some rest. Hidden says that he would handle the investigation and Luna could get some rest. However, she groans and says that she would go with him. Hidden reasons that they got back home late and without taking any breaks, so he understood if she slept until morning. Luna frowns before she flips around in bed to face him and says that if she went to bed, he had to be beside her. Hidden smiles and says that if that was the case, he would get some rest too. Luna throws her arms around him and suggests they get a shower first, but their conversation is quickly disrupted by a knock on the door. The receptionist hesitantly peeks into the room, apologizing for disturbing them. Immediately, Luna explodes, saying that if she was really sorry, she could come back tomorrow. Hidden, much more calmly, suggests that the reception return the next day if it wasn't anything too important. The receptionist tells them that a woman was looking for the boss if they've already returned, but Luna gets angrier and orders her to tell the woman they weren't back yet. The receptionist reasons that the woman had a certain ring with her. Immediately, Luna is struck silent, but she still looks very pissed. Wondering if the woman really was an envoy from the Queen, Luna is annoyed that she didn't have the common sense not to visit at such a late hour. Luna tells the receptionist to make the woman wait for an hour because they would be taking a shower first. The receptionist quickly follows her orders and makes her exit. Luna comments that she was going to punch the Knight envoy, but Hidden tries to calm her down, saying that the Knight might also be in a hurry too. Luna adds that she would be grateful if the Knight brought some info they didn't have beforehand, but Hidden says that that was probably asking too much as he hadn't taught the Knight even a couple of things of how they operated. Luna says that it wouldn't have mattered what he taught a total amateur like her, comparing it to giving a pig some pearls. However, since the Knight was still an envoy from the Queen, Luna suggests that they needed a shower if they were going to meet her. She invites him to take a bath with her to save time, and Hidden agrees, with Luna joking that things might not end with just a shower. Time passes, and the Knight envoy couldn't help but think how Hidden and Luna were taking their time. At that moment, Luna calls out to her from the second floor, saying that she could come on up for their conversation. The Knight envoy, Linnea, sits patiently as she waits for Hidden and Luna. Luna enters the room with a laugh, apologizing for making Linnea wait. Linnea is confused by her reaction but reassures her that it was fine, apologizing instead for suddenly visiting. She bows her head respectfully and tries to introduce herself, even when they had already met 2 years prior. Luna cuts her off, already knowing Linnea and her father. Linnea greets Hidden and says that over the past 2 years, she had realized how foolish she was during their time traveling as a part of the hero's party. Hidden says that it was good that she learned something. Linnea blinks up at him in surprise. Linnea laughs lightly, thanking Hidden. However, she says that she still has much to learn. As such, she shamelessly requests to learn from Hidden's knowledge and experience. Luna looks at Linnea incredulously, commenting that her request was easier said than done. Luna asks Linnea if she thought a pampered princess like her, someone who was born a noble, could handle actual field work. She reminds Linnea that their mission came first and she shouldn't expect them to hold her hand through everything. Linnea agrees, saying that was prepared for it and she had her own reasons for needing to do the work in the first place. But almost like she read her mind, Luna knew she was talking about working as one of the Dark Knights. Luna jokes that Linnea used to be someone who completely underestimated Hidden's role, and now it was ironic that she was taking a job like being a part of the new Knights. Linnea merely notes that Luna was very well informed. But Luna wasn't done. With a smug grin, she comments that the Queen had guts to second Linnea into their unit. Suddenly, Hidden leans in, placing a hand on Luna's shoulder. He asks her to stop since Linnea was there to discuss the mission. Pleased by his presence and his touch, Luna smiles and embarrassedly agrees with him. She clears her throat, focusing back on the task at hand. Holding up a rolled document, Linnea says that since the request for Giftia was to eliminate the central figure of an organization's operations unit, she suggests that they investigate the individual. However, she's immediately cut off. Luna asks her rhetorically if she thought they had time to do that when they already knew who it was. Linnea is surprised by the news, but Luna is almost equally confused by her reaction. Hidden steps in and explains that they knew that the unit's leader was a man named Noward. Additionally, a mage and a priest who used to party with Noward were also on the roster. If the group was capable of using force against demons and interfering with Giftia, then they were a serious threat to them. Linnea expresses her surprise that they already knew that much when they had just arrived. Hidden tells her that with Giftia's intel network they could investigate a location they had never set foot on. He continues that to eliminate their enemy, they needed to get a grasp on their movements, so they would start their investigation tomorrow. Linnea asks what kind of investigation they would do. Hidden reminds her of their journey a while back to slay the Demon Lord, and how they protected towns and villages from monster attacks. During that time, they gathered information from locals to narrow down the monsters' locations and then hunted them. Their investigation this time would work on the same principle. Linnea is concerned that they would end up alerting their targets, but Hidden quickly reasons that that was why they couldn't be obvious. They had to listen to idle chatter in taverns, fish for rumors and small talk, and they had to do it naturally so it didn't look like they were asking prying questions. Finally, Hidden tells Linnea to change out of her usual armor when doing intel work and instead wear something normal. To really dig the idea in, Luna tells Linnea that if she showed up tomorrow in a dress, she would send her flying. Linnea swears that she understood, but Luna rolls her eyes, not quite convinced but also not pushing it. Hidden resorts to saying that they would check her dress code tomorrow. Only one thing truly mattered, and it was to make everyone around her think that she was a simple town girl. She only had to focus on that. Linnea swears to do as told. Eventually, their meeting ends and Linnea takes her leave. As Hidden watches her go, he decides that it would be for the best that she didn't do any talking tomorrow. The skill to naturally draw out information took experience and a quick mind. Just having Linnea observe would be enough to fulfill their obligation to the Queen. Luna comes up to Hidden with a sly smile and asks if he was really only planning on just investigating. He pulls her close and promises her that they would also be settling a score while they were at it. Luna squeals in delight before suggesting that Linnea could observe the interview. With a dark look in his eyes, Hidden says that they should find and have a talk with the traitor in Giftia. Luna says that there was no doubt that the manager who greeted them the moment they got back to the guild was no doubt the mole. Hidden agrees, pointing out how, despite not telling anyone they were returning home, the man greeted them without a hint of surprise. That could only mean he was ready to see them. Not only that, but his lackluster report that nothing had changed during their time away was also suspicious. And so, for their meeting with Linnea, they intentionally used the reception room and he took the bait perfectly. Luna and Hidden flop into the bed together. Luna calls the manager an idiot, pointing out that the smartest move would have been to post a lookout instead and skip town in the middle of the night. However, Hidden says that because the man knew Linnea was coming with them, he got greedy and thought he could outsmart them. Luna says that thing might have worked out for the best anyway. Thanks to Linnea, they managed to lure out the fool. Hidden comments that he felt sorry for whoever had to train him. The next day, Linnea comes back to Giftia in a more casual outfit. She asks for their thoughts as she had assumed it would be enough. However, one look at their expressions and she lost her confidence. Hidden agrees that she was dressed like a town girl, but as Luna approaches and pinches the fabric between her fingers, she says that the material was too expensive. Linnea flinches in surprise, but just then the receptionist comes forward with a change of clothes she had prepared. They eventually head out to town. The bell to an inn clatters as Hidden pushes the door open. Immediately, an older gentleman takes notice of him. The man asks Hidden if he was finally rejoining the adventurers, adding that they would welcome him back with open arms. Hidden says that it was a tempting offer, but he was there for something else instead. Glancing behind him, Luna immediately understands his intentions and sticks to his side. Hidden tells the man that since they were in the neighborhood, he wanted to introduce Luna to him as his beloved wife. Immediately, the man exclaims in shock at the news. As Luna lovingly embraces Hidden, the man repeats to the whole inn that Hidden had finally gotten married. All the other patrons are just as shocked, slamming their drinks back down on tables in disbelief. The whole inn explodes into chatter. A man is surprised it wasn't Tiana, but another quickly corrects him that Tiana and Hidden had broken up over 2 years ago. I'm still surprised they were an actual couple with how Tiana dropped him so quickly for the hero's party. Another adventurer mourns that despite not being married to Tiana, Luna still ended up being a total knockout. As Luna laughs merrily at their reactions, one more adventurer moans that Hidden seemed to get all the luck. Luna laughs, saying that the inn was full of interesting characters. Hidden agrees that they were also skilled, others more so than the rest. His eyes roam the inn, looking for someone, before he addresses the man again, asking if Noward and his group weren't around. The man lets out a sigh as he admits that although Noward and his party occasionally came by to pick up quests, they had seen a lot less of them for the past year. According to rumors, they had found a new source of income, but no one knew all the details. Hidden points out that with no recent work, the inn should have ended their contract already. This is a bit confusing, but I'm guessing the inn is sort of the local adventurers guild, and the contract in question is an adventurer contract. The man agrees with Hidden, but points out that it didn't seem like Noward and the rest were completely unwilling to take a job, so it was a tough call. From behind them, Linnea watched their exchange with complete focus. The man suddenly brings up that Noward and his group barged into the inn yesterday. It was late at night, long after the counter had closed. At his words, Hidden, Luna, and Linnea are immediately focused. The man tells them that even though they had told Noward and his party they were closed, they kept insisting they be given a long-distance job heading far from the capital, saying they didn't care about the reward and they wouldn't listen to reason. They just seemed like they were in a huge hurry. However, the man didn't have any jobs to offer them at the time. He told them he'd contact them if something came up, but they quickly left, saying that it would be too late by then. Hidden asks if they came by that morning, but the man assures him that they never came back, finding it quite the problem. Hidden knew they were trying to use a quest as a cover to skip town, but if they got exposed at the acceptance stage, it didn't make much of a difference. It simply showed how desperate they were. Hidden says that running an adventurer's inn was a lot of work, and although he couldn't do it himself, he would inquire with a few acquaintances instead. The man lights up at his words, saying that he was out of options, but Hidden's offer would be a huge help. Hidden tells him not to get his hopes up too high. As they bid each other farewell, Luna merrily greets the other adventurers around the inn as well. The moment they're out of the inn and in the streets once more, Linnea asks Hidden and Luna of their next move since they hit a dead end. Luna turns to Linnea incredulously again and roughly suggests she start trying to use her head. She tells Linnea that they actually got plenty out of their conversation and now they were going to dig deeper. Linnea looks unsure, offering that they should try asking around other adventurers' inns. Her idea wasn't necessarily bad, but it would be rather difficult. The man at the last inn they went to knew Hidden, so they could just ask about things casually. However, other places wouldn't just spill their internal affairs to them. Additionally, since Noward and his party couldn't take quests from other guilds anyway, they wouldn't be able to learn anything. Linnea wonders if they were possibly still in the capital, but Hidden assures her that they were long gone by then. If they were still in the capital, they would have checked for quests at the guild first thing that morning. What they needed now was information on where Noward and his group had gone. Luna pleasantly smiles, asking where they would get that information. Hidden plays along, saying that asking the source directly was always the fastest option, but his words make Linnea confused. Hidden brushes off her question and tells Luna that part of the reason he didn't put a tail on him the night before was that he already had something in mind. He tells them that they would get the story out while the man's memory was still fresh. Luna laughs, calling Hidden rather cruel. Having enough of being left out of the conversation, Linnea calls out to them and says she didn't understand what they were talking about. Luna smiles and informs her that they already knew someone who knew where Noward and his party went. Although there were other ways to investigate, for now, he was their priority. Linnea asks why that man in particular. adding that Luna and Hidden didn't need to be so affectionate while talking. Hidden says that it was because the man was the only one to act so suspiciously. Although there was a chance it was a trap, his quick response pretty much confirmed that he was guilty. As such, they were going to make an example of him and beat the information out of him, much to Linea's shock. She's concerned that their actions would be exposed, but Hidden cuts her off and says that it was their job to not let it be exposed. He and Luna keep on moving ahead. Linnea purses her lips for a moment before reassuring them that she understood the situation. However, she asks what they meant by making an example of the man. Hidden glances at her, saying she already knew. He tells her that when an organization got big enough, one would find scum mixing in and traitors popping up. Dealing with people like that was also part of their job. Fully turning to face her, Hidden tells Linnea to learn how to spot the traitors and learn how to break them. Back at the Giftia Guild Hall, the receptionist works diligently at the front desk. However, at the door behind her leading further into the guild's basement, retching sounds could be heard echoing all over the walls. Kneeling before a bloodied body was Linnea. She heaved and took in deep breaths as she tried to calm herself. Luna merrily congratulates her for a job well done. Turning to Hidden, Luna winks and compliments him for making quick work of the man. Hidden only comments that his lips were too loose and he had caved too easily. He points out that it would have been a better lesson for Linnea if he held out a little longer. Gasping through her vomiting, Linnea says that it was already more than enough, but Hidden calmly reasons that she needed to get used to it. Linnea doesn't think she could, especially as she looks up to see the dead man's frozen and petrified face. As she continues to vomit, Luna casts her a disgusted look. Luna sighs in exasperation, saying that Linnea still had a long way to go. She couldn't believe that the queen was serious about using Linnea and added that she didn't want to be the one to clean up her messes. Hidden tells her that they just had to train Linnea so that didn't happen. Whatever came after that wouldn't be their problem anymore. Luna says that Hidden was being a little too nice to someone like her, but Hidden reassures her that that wasn't his intention. He turns to Linnea with an unreadable expression. Hidden says that since he was the one who dragged Linnea into their work, he intended to teach her the skills she needed to survive. Internally, he couldn't help but think how similar she was to when he lost his parents. He hoped that his actions now could serve as a way to repay his master, who had taught him to survive back then as well. Turning back to Luna, Hidden points out that if they don't make Linnea at least somewhat useful to the Dark Knights, they wouldn't be able to function well. If that happened, Giftia would definitely prosper. However, Hidden would end up staying busy and wouldn't be able to make time for him and Luna. Leaning close to her, Hidden suggests that she think of it as a necessary expense instead. Luna expresses that she wanted to be with just Hidden too. Linnea looks up to see them and groans before turning away. She expresses disbelief that they could be intimate in a place like that. Hidden calmly says that it was just a normal day for them. Luna laughs and says that if she was with the man she loved, anywhere felt like a bedroom. However, not missing the chance to pick fun at Linnea, Luna says that someone like her who had never known a man wouldn't understand. Linnea's face flushes red and she quickly changes the topic, asking what their next move was. All they were able to gather was that their destination was a remote village. They exit the basement and Hidden tells her that the important part was the route they used to get there. If they knew how Noward and his group were traveling, they would be able to get to the village ahead of them. Linnea says that she's never heard of the village beforehand, so she didn't know any shortcuts. She adds that it wasn't exactly information that one would hear in the capital. Luna turns to Hidden and asks if he knew about the village. It was Ikoina Village, Hidden's hometown. They file into a carriage and head off for the village. However, at one point the road gets rougher and Linnea is thrown a bit off balance. Hidden says that it was a path that no one used. Linnea asks if Noward's group was taking the road that detoured around the mountain range. Hidden says yes, adding that they were instead taking a shortcut in their faster, magical carriage. Despite being roughly thrown around in the carriage, Linnea keeps talking, considering that since it's only been 2 days since they left the capital, if all falls into place, they should be able to get to the village first. However, she asks what their plan of action was once they got there. Hidden remembers that they still had the official objective of slaying monsters. Beside him, Luna yawns and says that although Noward wasn't as good as Hidden, he was still supposed to be decent. She suggests letting them slay the monsters before taking them out. Hidden agrees it was a possible option, however they needed to dispose of them in a way that seemed natural, including their own response. An ambush in the dark, without ever showing their faces, would be the most efficient option. Linnea suggests staying hidden in the village for days and waiting for an opening. Hidden says that he and Luna could definitely lay low in the forest for a little while. Seeing her chance again, Luna turns to Linnea and says that they wouldn't be able to do that since they were stuck with Linnea, who would most likely have a meltdown in an environment like that. Linnea coldly apologizes before telling Luna not to belittle her so much, since they were the same age. Luna only laughs at her face, saying that a clueless chick like Linnea was just a little princess to her and that was that. Having had enough, Linnea tells Hidden to tell off Luna too, but Luna sticks her tongue out at Linnea, pointing out that Hidden would always be on her side. Hidden agrees that whatever Luna said was correct, but he does tell her not to provoke Luna so much. Luna pouts before Luna expresses that she wanted to be with just Hidden too. Linnea looks up to see them and groans, but Hidden tells her not to worry about it, but to his surprise, he finds that Luna was already snuggled up and asleep beside him. He tells Linnea to get some rest as well, since things would start to get busy once they arrived at the village. Linnea asks if he would be able to get some rest as well. Hidden reassures her that once they passed the mountains, they would arrive at a well-used traveling merchant's camp up ahead. Since it was safe there, he could rest up once they arrived. Linnea tells him to get some rest if he was struggling to stay up. He thanks Linnea, who thanks him in turn, and inevitably she dozes off. Once he was sure she was asleep, Hidden glances at Linnea from her seat at the back. Now that he thought about it, it was the first time Linnea thanked him for anything. They had never spoken to each other in that manner back when they were still at the hero's party. He thinks back how Linnea was chosen as one of the Dark Knight's assassins under the Queen's direct command precisely because she possessed the necessary skill. He couldn't help but wonder if they could have each fulfilled their respective roles if they had communicated properly on the journey to slay the Demon Lord. Crazy to be thinking about that now, 2 years too late. Then again, Bro told her she was about to be assassinated and she called him a liar. However, as they settled into the traveling merchant's camp, Hidden noticed that the landscape on the way to the village had completely changed. He supposed things changed over time. It was the same for Linnea, and it was the same for him. When morning came, their carriage was back on the road, now in a path more traveled. Luna smiles pleasantly as she looks out the window and into the village landscape. Hidden says that it was a village with nothing in it, but it was definitely more prosperous than when he left. Luna agrees, saying that it was true, especially when compared to the capital. Linnea calls her, calling her tactless for her words. Luna only smiles and says that if Hidden loved the village, then she did as well. As they step out of the carriage, Hidden tells her to love it to her heart's content because it was definitely his precious hometown. With all of them out of the carriage, Luna stretches her limbs and asks if he really planned on teaming up with Noward and his group. Hidden says that if they were willing, then yes. Then again, if they picked a fight with them instead of running, that just made their job easier. As he's wondering how they would play their cards, Hidden is brought back to the present when someone calls out to him. He turns as a familiar girl runs up to him. Hidden casually greets Tiana, who immediately beams at him. However, from behind Hidden, Luna says that Tiana was close enough. Tiana turns to Luna, remembering that she would definitely be with him. Luna tells Tiana point blank that Hidden was there for work, not homecoming. Tiana is struck silent, until she realizes that there was someone else with them, and immediately recognizes Linnea. Linnea and Tiana exchange warm greetings before Tiana asks if their work was related to slaying the local monsters, to which Hidden agrees. He says that he couldn't just stand by while monsters ran rampant in the forest he grew up in. Tiana says that she was happy to be able to work with Hidden as adventurers again. But at her words, Luna is immediately angered. She tells Tiana that Hidden wasn't there as an adventurer, but as a member of their organization. To really drive it in, she adds that he was doing the job as her husband. Tiana argues back that they were doing the same thing as when they were both adventurers. Linnea tries to calm Tiana and Luna down, asking Hidden to say something, but Hidden's focus was preoccupied. Another carriage had just rolled into the village. Hidden calmly says that there seemed to be a mix-up in the quests, and another adventuring party had taken on the job, only now arriving. Disembarking the carriage, an adventurer expresses surprise to see Hidden there. It was Noward and his party. Hidden casually greets him, saying that they just took the job through the same route as them. As an offhanded comment, Hidden passes on the greetings of someone named Rova, his words making Noward flinch. Noward realizes that Hidden was the reason their intel from Giftia suddenly dried up. With a kind smile, Hidden holds out a hand and says that they should call it a truce for now. Since Noward and his group took on the request as well, they should all work together to protect the village. Noward asks why they would work with the likes of Hidden, but Hidden seemed completely alright that they were backing out. Noward's eyes drift towards the people behind Hidden. He knew Tiana and Hidden were both skilled fighters, but they also seemed to have two capable-looking allies with them in Luna and Linnea. It was obvious to him that they came to target his party. However, it seemed like they wanted to complete the quest as well. Eventually, Noward lets out a short laugh and agrees. He smiles to himself as they had already made their own preparations to kill Hidden. Noward tells Hidden that they were planning to go on the hunt tonight. If Hidden agrees to join them, then surely they would come with them on the hunt. Immediately, Tiana tells them to wait. She argues that it was dangerous to start their hunt now. They should be well aware that monsters become more active at night. Noward says that that was exactly the reason they could make it work. However, for a split second, Noward has a cruel smile on his face that Tiana takes notice of but can't pinpoint the sudden reason for. Noward quickly goes back to normal and says that the conditions for the request emphasize that Tiana would participate in the hunt. Noward points out that if they went out, Tiana had no choice but to come along with them. Luna smiles mischievously and says that since that option was nice and easy, they could go along with it. Hidden quickly disagrees. He says that if Noward and the others said they were heading out that night, then they would do the same. Noward smiles, glad that everything was settled, despite Tiana still trying to stop them. Tiana tells Hidden that they should minimize the risk, but Hidden shuts her idea down, telling her to just go along with their plan. Tiana tries to ask why he was pushing for it, but Hidden is already moving on ahead with Luna. Eventually, Tiana sighs and gives in. At the very least, she argues that they should stick together. She didn't want them getting ahead of each other or having any misunderstandings. Linnea listens quietly as Tiana continues to say that they would rest at an abandoned building near the forest until nightfall, then head out. Noward and his group smile at the suggestion. Tiana assures them that she would arrange it so meals could be prepared there, so they didn't do anything reckless. Later that night, as Noward, his party, and Tiana settle into the abandoned building, Tiana lets the others know that Hidden and the others were about to check out of their inn in the village so they would join later on. She was going to pick them up, but she warned Noward and the others not to do anything impulsively. Noward raises his hands in surrender, assuring her that they would only rest there until Hidden and the rest arrive. With a click of the door, Tiana was out of the building. The moment she was gone, Noward slams his fist on the nearest wall in anger, cursing Hidden. He thinks that Hidden had stolen his position as the guild's star and convinced Tiana, who he had his eye on, to leave the capital, from what he understood of what happened to her anyway. He calls Hidden an eyesore in every way. The party member with a mustache reassures Noward that this time around, it would be his win for sure. The larger member agreed, adding that everything turned out just as Roba had said it would. Noward smiles as he agrees, but he says that he wasn't just following Roba's instructions. Noward had received word from Roba, the insider, and made the arrangements on the way to the village. He opens a small bag clipped to his belt and produces a corked vial. Noward was sure that Hidden would definitely come after them, even if they tried to flee somewhere remote. So Noward prepared some poison as a countermeasure. They would mix poison into the meal once everyone ate. Noward and his party would get by with an antidote and paralyze Hidden and the others. If they abandoned Hidden in the forest afterward, the monsters would take care of him. That way they get revenge and eliminate the hindrance. Noward couldn't care less about the monsters appearing in the village. It wouldn't affect their lives or income at all. Noward asks the party member with facial hair if he was sure that he didn't grab the wrong medicine, and although he stutters, he reassures Noward that he got the right one. Quickly changing the subject, the party member couldn't help but think how Hidden had nothing but top-quality women with him. I see that the men in this story besides Hidden and Ashram are actually horrible. Taking one of the vials from his companion, the larger party member grins as he says that this was their chance. Once they nailed the party with the drug, they were set. Noward agrees, saying that after getting rid of Hidden, they would tie up the women with him and leave the village under the cover of night. After that, they could do whatever they wanted. The larger party member wonders about Linea's chest. The guy is a pervert, and I'm doing my best to tone whatever he's saying down. My apologies. His companion is amazed he could tell even with all the armor on, and the other member proudly says that he was drooling just imagining what he could do. Again, a complete freak. His companion suddenly gets up and warns not to put anything weird in the vials, and the larger member quickly apologizes as he wipes away his drool. He reasons that they would end up mixed with something weird in the first place, but Noward warns that if they put it in now, there was a chance the other members would notice. He continues to tell them their plan. They would put the poison directly into the pot during the meal. If they did it casually, no one would think it was anything but seasoning. They wouldn't suspect for a second that they were putting poison straight into the pot. The larger member asks if it would really work, since if the situations were reversed, their party wouldn't eat food Hidden and the rest would make. Noward reassures him that Tiana was the one who provided the ingredients and they were also eating the same thing. And if Hidden and the rest still wouldn't eat, they would simply urge them under the pretense of working with them. Which honestly just makes things sound even sketchier, if it ever reached that point. Like he would basically be saying, eat this or else we won't work with you. The larger party member compliments Noward for his thinking as it felt like he was a true villain. Noward smiles and says that it was only standard procedure for him. He begins to make quick work of the ingredients provided for their dinner. The party member with a mustache asks what he was cooking and Noward says that it was a special soup simmered with spices and chicken. The man compliments him for his top-notch cooking skills, but Noward scoffs and says that his flattery wouldn't get him much more than stew. Internally, he was focused only on assassinating Hidden by that night. Later on, they make their way down the forest path. Hidden's group walked up front, followed by Tiana in the middle, and Noward's party at the very back. Luna skips joyfully as she comments how good the stew was. She was surprised that Noward had that kind of talent. Linnea agrees that it went beyond simple home cooking, and it was at a level where they could even open up a shop. Noward smiles, saying that if that was what Linnea thought, then he didn't mind making it for her again. Tiana glances back at Noward's group, her expression rather concerned. Noward only returns a smile. Hidden smiles and says that he appreciated the meal and would like to enjoy the flavor again. Noward yells that Hidden wasn't included in the offer. Hidden turns to him with the same smile, wondering why he wasn't allowed when he wasn't planning on stealing the recipe or anything. Noward only laughs, saying that the recipe had nothing to do with it, and the taste came completely from skill. Internally, Noward thinks that it was about time the poison kicked in. Not only that, they were close to monster territory already. Hidden smiles brightly at Noward, asking what was wrong and if he had decided to treat them to more stew again. But Noward could only think that Hidden was finally finished. Laughing at Hidden, Noward says that he should have gotten them more stew because it might have been his last supper. Hidden's smile doesn't falter for a moment as he says that he would take care to make sure it wasn't. Noward continues to laugh as he says that it would be nice if that was all it took. However, as he says that it was too late, he doesn't take notice of the drool sliding down the corner of his mouth or how his companions had fallen to the ground, and how he was quickly following suit. He collapses weightlessly to the ground. His mind fuzzy, he asks what was happening. His companions had completely gone silent. His voice slurred, he asked Hidden what he did to them. Holding up a familiar vial, Hidden calmly says that it looked like Noward had a pretty good idea, but the latter is unable to say anything from both shock and the poison. Hidden says that he took the antidote Noward's party had prepared. He switched the contents of the bottle completely. Noward couldn't believe it, but as he stutters, Luna steps on his face, saying that they easily saw through their little scheme. Noward continues to try and wail in despair. Hidden says that when they accepted Tiana's proposal, it became a certainty. Hidden had heard from Roba that Noward's party were going to try and frame them. As such, Hidden deliberately let Noward proceed with poisoning the food and join them later. The party was most likely tense to avoid getting caught, but people tended to focus solely on the moment they administered the poison. In that split second, Hidden retrieved the antidote and swapped it for fake ones. Dropping the emptied vials in front of Noward, Hidden explains that after that, while Noward and his party had drank plain water, Hidden and the rest had taken the antidote. From a bit of ways off, Tiana hesitantly calls out and makes sure that they were only going to capture Noward and the others. However, as Linnea binds the enemy's arms together, she tells her that they were going to have them die there before that was their job. Tiana's face falls as she realizes that Linnea was now in the same line of work as Hidden. She continues to tighten the other's bindings and admits that that was roughly the case. Luna frowns as she hears Linnea blatantly reveal her identity, but it just confirmed things for Tiana. Her face crumples as she realizes it was all true. Tiana suddenly looks up and asks if Linnea was alright as she understood that things have been hard since her father's death. At her words, Linnea clenches her fist. With a measured tone, she tells Tiana that she swore to devote herself to the country and the people, and that was why she was there now. Internally, she thinks of her talk with the Queen and how she was made to be a Dark Knight. Linnea says that it was because of that reason that she must determine whether she could bear the sin or not. Linnea informs Tiana that Noward's party intended to leave the village after harming Hidden's group. If Tiana wasn't in the village, normal monsters would have caused severe damage. Tiana hesitantly agrees, but she still remains unsure. Linnea continues to say that if they let Noward and the rest go now, others would suffer at their hands. She reassures Tiana that she had nothing to be concerned about as the executioners would end up being Hidden, Luna and her. Hearing their conversation, Luna asks Linnea what she thought she could even do when she was just watching things unfold. To that, Linnea had no words. Hidden orders Linnea to focus on tightening their defenses and Linnea quickly follows instructions, walking away from them and heading to where Tiana was. Linnea recounts that the monsters would target Noward's tied-down party first and, taking out her shield, she would serve as their tank from that distance. From behind her, Tiana tries to say something again, but she's quickly cut off by a finger to her lips. Linnea smiles lightly as she pokes Tiana's lip, much to the other girl's confusion. Linnea says that Hidden was a wonderful person. She had come to see that by performing the same role as him. She says that 3 years ago, back when they had set out to defeat the Demon Lord for the sake of the country, she had never noticed until the end. They were able to proceed safely on their journey because Hidden was protecting them. Villainous schemes and assassins from the Demon Kingdom. It was all thanks to Hidden carrying out the dirty work of eliminating those threats. Linnea continues to say that his resolve to do so ran deep and regardless of what anyone thought, he still did it. She says that although the things he wanted to protect weren't the country or large groups of people, Noward and his party had spoken ill of such a person, and what's more, they tried to kill him. Linnea had no right to say so, but personally she didn't want to leave them alive. She asked Tiana what she thought. For Tiana, she now knew that Hidden had tried to keep her away from danger and she never noticed he was sending money to their village too. Her past mistakes wouldn't disappear, but she came there hoping to repay even one of her debts to him. And above all, when it came to Noward and the others, Tiana finally says that there was no way she could forgive them. Eventually, the monsters came bounding into the clearing where they were. They immediately lunged for Noward and the others who were unable to do anything. As the monsters made quick work of Noward and the rest, Linnea says that it's been a while since she and Tiana had teamed up like that. But with them together, she was sure that many monsters were no match for them. Tiana agrees, and as she takes out her necklace, she asks Linnea to protect her properly until her spell is ready. Linnea needed to draw them in as much as possible. Tiana begins to chant using her necklace as a guide as the monsters bound for them. Before the monsters could reach Tiana, Linnea easily blocks their way. Linnea clenches her fists tighter around the grip of the shield before using it to bash at the monsters, sending them flying. She continues to use it as both offense and defense against the beasts, keeping them in line. When a beast gets too close to her, its mouth ready to bite at her, its head is easily pierced by something thin and sharp. Hidden had thrown one of his weapons. With the blood of the monsters and the bodies of Noward and the rest scattered all around them, they slowly rise as Tiana gathers them around her staff. Hidden, Luna, and Linnea stop as Tiana finishes her spell. The blood from the ground pierces the monsters into place before burning everything into ashes with a terrifying explosion of flames. Back at the royal capital, at a nobleman's estate, a man walks down by the inner walls. His stroll is cut short when he steps on something wet that splashes over his shoes. He looks down, concerned and confused. He flinches to realize what he was seeing. The man shrieks in horror to find a half-rotting head of a man's corpse. The man quickly makes his way to his superior in the house, relaying the news of the dead body. However, his superior is hardly surprised, only telling him to hurry up and get it cleaned up. However, the man takes out an envelope and holds it out to his superior. Apparently, it was a sealed letter that was attached to the body. His superior thinks it's nonsense for a moment or some sort of prank, but opening the letter and reading its contents, his expression completely morphs into shock and panic. Meanwhile, at the castle, the queen asks her attendant what happened to the nobleman from before. Her attendant says that he hadn't come to the castle in several days. News is that he had completely shut himself up in his estate. The queen chuckles to herself. If the leader of the opposition stopped showing his face even without saying anything, the rest of their party would finally understand. The activity of the organizations opposing their peace with the Demon Kingdom had died down dramatically. Not only that, but in town rumors had spread that it was all thanks to the Dark Knights. Kneeling before the queen in her throne was Linnea. The queen had heard about the same rumors. With Linnea accomplishing her task smoothly, the queen says that she was glad she recommended her. Linnea thanks her for her praise, but her face is anything but reassured. Onyx laughs at her expression, saying that she had the look of someone who felt bad for being praised when she was totally useless during the time. Linnea frowns, but she admits that Onyx's insight was accurate, and that was exactly what she felt. Onyx goes quiet, her expression dark and unimpressed. Turning back to the queen, Linnea asks a request both from her and Onyx. The queen tells her to continue, but before she could say anything, Onyx remembers that Hidden was the one Linnea had gone on a quest with, which could only mean to her that Linnea wanted to be by Hidden's side, so she was going to request the queen to let her go on loan as part of her studies. Linnea admits that that was her request, but she wanted to disagree about Onyx's implications on her thoughts about Hidden. Linnea says that she was well aware that Onyx's group was short-handed, but Onyx cuts her off. Teasingly, she says that the perfect job they had for Linnea was serving tea. The queen quickly reprimands Onyx, who only sticks her tongue out playfully. Linnea seriously says that she didn't believe she could fill a void like that, but she's again cut off when the queen sighs. The queen says that since she would be entrusting her to outsiders and won't be involved, she won't be able to wait long for Linnea. She initially intended for Linnea to gain experience there for 2 years. She suddenly goes quiet, a dark expression on her face. The queen's soft smile returns and she says that she would give Linnea 1 year. Taking out a dagger, the queen adds that after her year was up, she would formally assign Linnea a job. However, if she failed to perform the job, the queen would consider the time given to Linnea meaningless and damaging to the nation's interests. Linnea would then have to give up her life. The queen says that if Linnea could swear to her on that, she would write the letter of recommendation. Linnea promises to become a knight capable of meeting her expectations. If she couldn't, she swore to dedicate her life to the state and the queen. Pleased by her answer, the queen says that she would present Linnea with the knife and the recommendation letter. She unsheathes the dagger from its place. Pricking her finger on the sharp blade, she lets her blood drip into a goblet of wine. The queen says that hopefully the blade won't be used to claim Linnea's neck, but instead bury those who wanted to harm the nation. The queen orders her to make the oath. Taking the goblet from the attendant, Linnea swears to offer her gratitude for the queen's compassion. The oath was for the queen and the whole nation. Linnea empties the goblet of all its contents. Lowering back the goblet into its tray, Linnea excuses herself from the throne room and heads back out into the palace corridors. However, as she walks, she stops in surprise to see some familiar faces. It was Mira and Ashram. Ashram smiles at the sight of her, saying that he was seeing a lot of old friends that day. Linnea is confused for a moment. As far as she knew, Ashram was always seeing Mira. After a pause, Ashram agrees. Linnea reprimands him, saying that with the way he answered, it might make Mira feel like she had no reason to try. Immediately, Mira defends Ashram, saying that she visited Ashram's room because she wanted to. After a while, Linnea notes that Ashram was the same as always. Ashram agrees, saying that although he knew comparing her there might make him sound self-deprecating, but he thinks Linnea was doing perfectly well. Ashram says that she was growing much more than an inexperienced person like him. Linnea's expression shifts slightly as she internally thinks that that wasn't the case at all. She hasn't heard any bad rumors about Ashram's work. With the power he had as the hero, he could save many more people if he wanted to. However, feeling personally responsible and guilty for failing to defeat the Demon Lord, it may be inevitable if he chooses not to follow that path. Linnea also notices that Mira's feelings for Ashram didn't seem to have changed. Based on the atmosphere Linnea had vaguely picked up at the time, she thought Mira only respected Ashram as the saintess because he was the hero. However, Linnea realizes that Mira truly respected and loved him from the bottom of her heart. For Mira to be happy, all Ashram had to do was take the first step. If only he would look at her in a new light. Linnea smiles sadly. She asks Ashram if he really thought she had grown, and he assures her that he still thought so. Linnea says that that was nothing but a misunderstanding and that she hadn't grown at all. Just like back then, the current situation is that she was being protected and helped by prudent people. Ashram says that it wasn't true at all. With a rather chilling look in his eye, he says that for him she looked enviably strong. Linnea says that she thinks it was because she met someone she could genuinely respect and rely on. Ashram admits that that was exactly what he was envious of. He couldn't seem to bring himself to rely on people or believe in them anymore. Linnea laughs at his words, saying that he could do it if he just met the right person. As an example, she tells him to look beside him. Someone who stayed near a man who was merely not dead yet while devoting her heart completely without any compensation. Linnea asks if Ashram truly didn't know a wonderful person like that. Ashram is confused by her words. But Mira's face had completely flushed red. She immediately tells Linnea to cut it out, but with a cheeky smile, Linnea says that taking the first step was important. Turning around, Linnea bids a confused Ashram and an embarrassed Mira goodbye, saying that she had some urgent business to attend to. Meanwhile, at the Argandia Demon Kingdom, Luna lets out a sigh of relief as she and Hidden enter the guild headquarters. She stretches her body, remarking that since it was finally over, then it should surely shut up the people opposing the queen. Hidden adds that one barrier to diplomatic relations with Argandia had also disappeared in the process. Luna collapses on the bed, saying that although she wished she could have stayed in the royal capital a little longer if only she didn't have to rush back, Hidden says that since the job was done, she could finally rest. Once the report was over, they could finally take it easy. Taking off his coat, Hidden asks to sleep next to Luna, and she quickly makes room in the bed for him. As they cuddle in bed, Luna says that she wanted to take a whole month off with Hidden, and Hidden happily agrees. However, a sudden presence in the room with them frowns, saying that their decision to go on leave would be a problem. It was Renija. She informs them blankly that while he and Luna were away, so many jobs had come in that they couldn't get there. Hidden and Luna are both quiet, but while Hidden was mostly caught off guard, Luna is brimming with rage. Finally coming to his senses, Hidden says that right when they were about to rest, they were immediately sent on a business trip. He calmly argues that if they didn't take a little vacation, Luna wasn't going to last. Luna finally explodes, asking before any of that, why was Raija entering a married couple's room all of a sudden? Luna remembers that when she had reported to Raija earlier, she had left saying that she was going to tell the Demon Lord everything. Raija admits that she planned to do that, but a visitor had suddenly arrived, so she was showing her in. Luna orders her not to let the visitor in and instead to send her back. Raija calmly apologizes because she had already brought the visitor in. The visitor turns out to be Linnea. At the sight of her, Luna gets even angrier, saying that she told them to stay out of their bedroom. Linnea bows respectfully to Luna and Hidden, apologizing for barging in while they were resting. Apparently, she had been ordered to assist them at the branch from that day forward. Both Hidden and Luna are surprised to see Linnea again, not quite sure if it really was her. Luna gets mad again, demanding to know what she was doing there and what help she could even offer them. Linnea asks them to think it through, but Luna quickly refuses, saying that there was nothing for her to help with. Hidden asks if it was another request when they were just thinking of taking a break for a while. Linnea asks instead if they could give her a command since she would be working under them for a while. Luna grits her teeth in anger. She tells Linnea that she wasn't just playing house and she should think for herself. She reminds Linnea what happened that last time she set out on a journey with the same mindset. Linnea kneels down and pleads with them, saying she wanted to become stronger. She holds out the recommendation letter to them. Looking down at the paper, Luna clicks her tongue and asks if it had the Queen's signet. Linnea says that she thought that learning by their side was the best way to become stronger, so she asks again to allow her to stay near them. Luna wails in despair, but after some silence, Hidden agrees to the request, much to Luna's shock. Hidden says that when work came up, he would tell her then. But in the meantime, she would follow Raija's instructions. Raija smiles softly. Linnea thanks them both. Luna tackles Hidden, saying that she still hadn't accepted the request. She asks Hidden why he was agreeing to it, but Hidden reassures her that it could be an upfront investment for them. If someone in Lina's position grew, it would make things easier for them. Luna says that they would surely lose, and she makes him promise never to do stocks. Hidden agrees, adding that if it turned out that Lina was completely hopeless once they actually used her, Luna could discharge her from her combat forces. Hidden says that he was no good at managing people. Luna eventually agrees and Hidden thanks her. Raija excuses herself and Lina, saying that they would discuss the details later. Once outside, Lina lets out a sigh of relief. Seeing the bittersweet ones was definitely easier on her. I think she's referring to meeting Ashram and Mira compared to Hidden and Luna. Meanwhile, Luna and Hidden relax in their room. Luna says that in the end the hero's party was nothing but for show. She asks if they were parting ways with the spoiled brats. Hidden agrees, saying that as long as they operate behind the scenes they probably won't be meeting again. Luna smiles teasingly at Hidden and asks what they were going to do from now on. Hidden smiles at her lovingly before they share a kiss. Hidden promises to stay by Luna's side as there were things to do at Giftia. Luna didn't know how long Giftia would be needed, but as long as the world was full of malice, at least for now, they must exist as a necessary evil. Hidden says that he would carefully observe to see whether or not they become unnecessary. They're interrupted when Rayija knocks on the door and enters the room. Hidden is surprised at the speed of Rayija's work. Luna is angered because she had said beforehand that she wanted to rest for a bit. Rayija apologizes, but she says that she was delivering the summary as soon as possible. She calls out to someone named Nikita from outside the door and a half-canine girl enters. Nikita explains that for the request, the goal was to grasp the overall picture of the situation and settle it. Hidden asks what situation they meant, and Nikita explains that it was referring to human trafficking. Before the peace treaty was signed, they believed it was being conducted by black marketers in the Samanade Queendom and Argandia Demon Kingdom. Hidden and Luna asked that if there was no such organization or traffickers in Samanade, then did that mean they were operating within Argandia? Radega agrees, saying that that was what they believed. She adds that considering the gravity of the matter, they had received the request directly from the Queen. Not only her, but Argandia couldn't overlook such a situation either. Rayija asks Luna and Hidden to draw out the pus that infected the kingdom.